Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable, see playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 1661, Debate over the Godly Ways. Once he had finished cultivating the truth godly way, Nathan was capable of seeing through the rules concerning the basic laws of this world. His cultivation didn't allow him to see through it completely. However, as long as he could capture a certain degree of the mysteries within, he'd still have the capacity of noticing any cracks or flaws. To be more explicit, Nathan would be able to simply glance at an unharmed mountain and see directly through to its weaknesses. By using the Law Spear strike to hit the mountain's utmost weak spot, the entire mountain would collapse in accordance to his prediction. From ordinary mortals to supreme lords in the universe, they all followed the most basic set of rules. The truth godly way was originally a rule that set other rules in the divine land, and it was also the most popular type of godly way. It was, and with reason, the choice of many true gods. Up until now, there had only been one thing that Nathan hadn't been able to see through, and that was the product of the fusion of the laws of the five elements. Therefore, Lucille, who cultivated in the five elements godly way, was his nemesis. More so, because the five elements godly way was fused together, the rules within were extremely complicated and it was very difficult for Nathan to separate them. At this moment, however, Maha released a burst of deep purple light, enveloping the area. Nathan hadn't felt the existence of the laws of the five elements, but his truth godly way had lost its effectiveness. That was when all the lines and dots began to disappear simultaneously, as if they had been covered by some kind of magical power. This was the first time Nathan had encountered such a situation, it was thus only natural for his eyes to reveal a hint of panic. Maha's embarrassed expression from before had been completely swept away. In this deep purple space, he seemed indifferent and calm. Although the smile on his face was shallow, it equally gave off a very rich sense of ridicule. "Do you find it interesting, Nathan?" Maha asked. "The truth is that I've always thought the truth godly way is some sort of trash. Let alone you and me, even a true god or a holy being of the divine land couldn't genuinely control the truth. Yet people in a small world like you think they've found the truth." Nathan's face slightly darkened at Maha's words. Maha's voice had not only spread throughout Iron Moon City, but he had also activated a roaring token, sending his message into the entire universe. All of the supreme lords in the evolutionary universe now had a visible trace of astonishment on their faces. Even the supreme lords of the sacred race had expressions of discomfort that lined their features. What Maha's words really meant was that even the boundless divine land was only a small world. Moreover, he also looked down upon the truth godly way. Dang it, he's going to bluff again. Supreme Lord Denzel spat as his face filled with disapproval. Strictly speaking, Maha's talent is excellent, and he is surely going to become a true god. But, he always bluffs. And he always talks a lot. Many supreme lords within the sacred race equally disliked Maha. Even if Maha had an extraordinary status and talent, and becoming a supreme lord was just a simple matter for him, he was still a world lord now. When a junior of the sacred race were to act just as arrogantly all day, his behavior would inevitably arouse the displeasure of a few higher-ups of the sacred race. By this point, Maha's words had even belittled the divine land and the holy beings. The supreme lords that originally disliked Maha could know nothing but disapprove further in their hearts, a few of them even thinking that this fellow was an embarrassment to the sacred race. On one of the stars in the evolutionary universe, Wynn suddenly opened his eyes. The celestial position race had a comprehensive plan against the sacred race. Wynn hadn't hidden himself in the dead water world with the other supreme lords. Instead, he hid on a pitch-black star in the depths of the starry sky. Once Maha's voice had resonated in his ears too, a faint look of surprise washed over Wynn's face. Could this kid be Murphy's disciple? His words are similar to the debate over the godly ways. It's just that his means of expressing himself is too arrogant, Wynn murmured. However, if he is capable of stepping into the divine land in the future, he might be able to achieve quite a few accomplishments. The debate over the godly ways was known as the debate over the best godly way. This was a debate that spanned over hundreds of divine eras. After countless years of evolution, the Divine Land had become a highly developed society. However, there was no limit to the pursuit of life. So far, the people of the Divine Land had bitterly pursued the mysteries within. The process of pursuit was usually divided into three paths, the first one being the most direct, also known as the exploration by the holy beings in the chaos. Up till now though, there hadn't been much success. The second one was to solve the Sanskrit words and find clues to extraordinary creatures, while the third one was to fight for the godly ways. Clearly, there was ultimately an end to the human force. Even a holy being's power wasn't limitless, but the extension of one's mind had the capacity of going further. After countless true gods painstakingly confirmed various theories, certain people attempted to come up with a few perfect assumptions in their minds before proving anything. Now, the second way was the most popular because the existence of the Sanskrit words had confirmed the evidence of the extraordinary creatures. On the other hand though, the third way was also very important. The debate over the godly ways would be reincarnated once every few decades, with an extremely high level of attention in the Divine Land. Although Maha didn't have the qualifications to join the debate over the godly ways, a mere secondary creature capable of obtaining such insights so casually actually gave him the potential to join the debate over the godly ways. Nathan stared at Maha, his handsome face now scowling with depression. He shook his long spear and asked, "Have you always been like this?" "Like what, exactly?" Maha smiled. "You talk too much." Nathan coldly shouted. He turned his spear around and his body shot towards Maha. Even though Nathan's lost spear strike had already completely lost all effect in this purple space, he didn't have the slightest intention of retreating. His strength might not be the strongest amongst the godly geniuses, but the significance of his actions in battle was very important. Previously, Supreme Lord of Original Sin had told Nathan that he didn't expect him to kill Maha, but that if he was the one to die instead, he must die in Maha's hands. The momentum within the evolutionary universe was very easy to suppress, but it was also just as simple to stimulate. If Maha was capable of going about his slaughter and causing all the living beings within the universe to lose their confidence, then this momentum would truly be limitlessly suppressed. However, if some signature character, such as Nathan, was killed by Maha, then this momentum might not necessarily drop, because Nathan's death would stir up a common hatred towards the said enemy. This was the principle of, an oppressed army fighting with desperate courage is sure to win, and it would instead greatly increase the universe's momentum. Nathan's seniors had made fully preparations. Supreme Lord Helm's space lock along with the technique of resurrecting of Supreme Lord Lester could guarantee his safety. But nothing was for sure. The nature of this purple space had been changed by Maha. Nathan couldn't clearly explain what kind of method Maha had used, and was unable to confirm whether or not the space lock would truly be capable of pulling him back to Supreme Lord Helm's side. After all, the space lock was a typical spatial theurgy, which meant that in his battle with Maha, Nathan might really die. "I have to go all out," Nathan thought. He was a person who was rather afraid of death, or perhaps it could be said that he was proud and wasn't willing to casually plummet to his death. Once he sensed that he might really die, he actually calmed down. Whoosh! As he rushed towards Maha, the light in his eyes became increasingly bright. He had already used the truth godly way to the limit, and under the operation of the lost spear strike, the countless blood vessels around his pupils began to rapidly flow with golden blood. The tiny blood vessels couldn't withstand such a surge of fluid, and as they began to rupture one after the other, the golden blood spewed outward, causing his eyes to shine with a golden radiance. And that was when, within this purple space, he began to see traces of blurry lines and dots. He could also once again see Maha's faintly discernible flaws. "I wish the lines and dots can be clearer," he thought. As he rushed forward, the incomparably powerful long spear once again pierced towards Maha's weak point, as if it were aiming at a prey. At the last second though, Maha faintly smiled and said, "I've already said that the truth godly way is useless." As Maha's voice fell, the color of this purple space suddenly changed. The attribute and rules of the space once again changed, and the lines and flaws that Nathan had painstakingly captured instantly vanished, leaving no trace behind. Puff! Nathan's spear still pierced Maha's chest. Maha didn't even try dodging it. In fact, he had even disdained doing so. He forcefully withstood Nathan's spear, his face still smiling as he raised the blade he held in his hand. Chapter 1662, Grand World Technique. Nathan could kill his opponent with a single lost spear strike only when he saw directly through his opponent's flaw. This was because he had to employ the lost spear strike at the very moment he discovered the flaw. If he were to see his opponent's flaw, but not use the lost spear strike to attack, the spear strike would then become of ordinary strength, displaying only very little power. Maha had speculated that Nathan's truth godly way was useless, so he simply allowed Nathan's spear to pierce through his chest. As the spear pierced through Maha's body, a burst of fervent cheers sounded throughout the Iron Moon City. Before Zen had appeared, Nathan had been the most famous godly genius of the younger generation. Everyone thought that his truth godly way and law spear strike were magical and formidable. A few people said that once one cultivated the law spear strike to a certain level, they could even see through the flaws of the entire universe. If they thrust the spear into the entire universe would collapse. And, in many ways, that wasn't wrong. The universe created by the holy being was not perfect, and it also had its flaws. However, in order to cultivate the truth godly way to such a very high level and destroy the universe with a single spear strike, one had to reach the cultivation level of holy being. It was due to the various legends that caused Nathan to be the #1 godly genius. It was only after Zen used the magnetic sacred mountain to break the law spear strike and heavily beat Nathan that Zen took his place and became the #1 godly genius instead. Elsewhere, within the Dead Water world, something was also going simultaneously. Supreme Lord of Original Sin began to speak anxiously. He has failed. Supreme Lord Helm, pull him back. Sending Nathan over was originally a risky move and the Supreme Lords had already planned this possibility out. Supreme Lord Helm reached out and gently turned his hand, causing streams of space law power to spread from his body. The brilliant white light that formed by the space law extended to an immeasurable distance. Aside from Nathan, several Grand World Lords of the human race had also been sent to other Supreme Worlds to slaughter the sacred martial artists. That was when Supreme Lord Helm attempted to pull Nathan back from the Sunflower Water world. This heavenly destiny could not be considered powerful, but when cooperating with other people, it was extremely effective. It was capable of projecting anyone into any place, and then pulling them back at any time. However, Supreme Lord Helm was given quite the surprise as he tried to pull Nathan out. "Oh no, I can't draw him back," he gasped. When Supreme Lord of Original Sin heard Supreme Lord Helm speak, he silently closed his eyes, as if he had somehow anticipated this occurrence. The other Supreme Lords also frowned. What exactly is that reddish-purple light? It's not something related to the domain. It is completely impossible for an ordinary domain to stop Supreme Lord Helm's space lock. It's probably some kind of godly way. We've never seen it before. All of the Supreme Lords present began to discuss with one another. They had already discovered that something was wrong and were beginning to worry. Ultimately, it turned out that what they had guessed was actually right. Supreme Lord Helm didn't give up. With a sudden wave of his hands, he actually succeeded in cutting off a few other space locks. The white band of light that was linked to Nathan had suddenly doubled in thickness. Despite that though, no matter how hard Supreme Lord Helm pulled, he was unable to pull Nathan back. This wasn't a question of strength though, but rather, the space law had completely lost its effectiveness. Maha might have had Nathan's spear stabbing out of his body, but right then, he raised his head to look. He had long since felt the existence of the space lock. He even activated a roaring token, and uttered, "Although I don't know which Supreme Lord is taking action now, there is no doubt that your efforts will be in vain. Don't waste your efforts." And once the words left his mouth, the originally hidden space lock instantly revealed its true form. This space lock came from far away and connected itself to Nathan's back. Moreover, it was currently shaking violently. Maha's blade gently reverberated in the air, carving out a crimson band of light. As the blade cut down onto the band of light, it actually instantly broke apart the space lock. With a quick wave of Maha's hand, his blade changed directions and began chopping toward Nathan. Puff! Beneath the gushing golden blood, the blade had already completely penetrated Nathan's chest. Warriors like Nathan and Maha had all sorts of methods for protecting themselves. Nathan's greatest method of protection this time around was Supreme Lord Helm's space lock of course, and in addition, he equally had a cup of life in his possession. This cup of life was gifted to him by the patriarch of Janet G's clan, and it was said that it could grant Nathan his second life. As Nathan's life energy continued to fade away, the cup of life was also activated and it continuously helped Nathan replenish his life energy. From his position, Nathan was still conscious and he wasn't giving up. However, no matter how hard he struggled or how much force he used, pulling the long spear out of Maha's body seemed completely impossible. "It's best if you just stop trying. In this space, I am an invincible existence," Maha said smilingly. Nathan held his silence. Nathan was used to this tone of voice. In fact, he was usually the one employing it. He had never expected that someone would use this same tone against him, and would be going to kill him. Overall though, he knew he would accept being defeated by Maha. Suddenly, Zen came to Nathan's mind. What would Zen do if he was in such a position when fighting Maha? Would he be capable of breaking through this space? As Nathan mulled this over, the life energy in the cup of life that the G-clan's patriarch created was consumed completely. There was nothing left. Even worse, nearly all of the golden blood in Nathan's body had equally been consumed, and he was starting to look mighty pale. He opened his dry, pasty mouth and said with a sneer, "Do you really think you're invincible? There will always be someone stronger who can defeat you. You mean Zen, right?" Maha looked down at Nathan. Nathan earnestly nodded his head to accentuate his words. After all, Zen was truly perhaps the only warrior in the entire universe that could kill Maha. "I've been waiting for him for a long time, but he's just a coward. It's a pity that you won't watch me kill that little brat." Maha shook his head anew and gently wielded the blade in his hand. Nathan suddenly felt a sharp pain in his physical body. He gradually lost consciousness and fell down, slamming hard onto the hill below. Another burst of fervent cheer came from Iron Moon City. These cheers, of course, were coming from the sacred martial artists. To the contrary though, all the martial artists in the evolutionary universe were currently silent instead and even had a look of utmost depression carved on their faces. Every time Maha killed a human warrior, he would announce his victory to everyone in the universe. This time however, he didn't do so. Not too far away, Connie rushed over and threw herself into Maha's arms. "Maha, why don't you use the roaring token to announce the result? Let me help you do that," she said in a soft voice. In her opinion, killing Nathan was a great honor. However, Maha just shook his head. "No need. I've come to the Sunflower Water World to suppress the evolutionary universe's momentum. The effect of killing ordinary martial artists is very good. However, it's better to not announce Nathan's death to the universe." "Why?" Connie asked, as she blinked hard a few times. "Because something will develop in the opposite direction as it reaches the extreme." Maha smiled. "Anyway, there's probably someone even more anxious than I to announce the result to everyone in the universe." Maha might also be able to figure out what the human Supreme Lords were thinking of. If someone like Nathan were to be sacrificed, it would definitely arouse the anger of the entire universe. It would even be able to greatly reverse the universe's momentum. Maha had obviously predicted this situation. However, he wouldn't let Nathan off the hook just because of that, as it would only be counterproductive. Even if the universe's momentum was greatly strengthened by Nathan's death, Maha would still have killed a godly genius, which was still a good thing for him. And on top of everything else, this godly genius was once the #1 godly genius of the universe. Not a sound could be heard coming from the Deadwater world. The Supreme Lords remained completely silent. "How did that guy manage?" Supreme Lord Helm questioned. "How did he cut off my space lock?" He continued. His face was filled with disbelief. His space lock was the law of causality from the heavenly destiny, so how could this law of causality be so easily cut off by someone? There could only be one reason. Wynn's voice was suddenly heard by all of them. "And what would that be?" Supreme Lord Helm asked. "Maha cultivates another godly way, the Grand World Technique. He cultivates two godly ways at the same time, actually. One is the Great Dominance Technique and the other is the Grand World Technique. The area that the light covers is his world, so naturally, he has the ability to sever your space lock," Wynn replied. Chapter 1663, at the end of his forbearance. Being caught inside the space of Maha's Grand World Technique, you were already considered powerless. All of the rules were decided by him. Whether it would be the laws of the 5 elements, the time law or the space law, it had basically no effect once you were inside it. What was more amazing was that Maha could even change the pattern of laws on his own. Does this mean that, within this guy's Grand World Technique, even the heavenly destiny is useless? Supreme Lord of Oracle asked with furrowed brows. In this way, if a Supreme Lord would be caught in the space of Maha's Grand World Technique, using their heavenly destiny would be an empty attack and they would even be killed by him. Yes, but Maha hasn't condensed his godly tile yet, so his Grand World Technique isn't complete. He isn't able to change all of the rules. Supreme Lord Helm's space lock belongs to the space law, and is most likely to be changed by the Grand World Technique. That's why Maha cut it apart so easily, Wynn explained. "I see," Supreme Lord of Oracle said with a nod. The first time she met Maha, the latter was rude to her. Right at that moment, she already had the urge to kill him. If it was not for the good of the whole, she might not be able to control her desire to kill him. What about Nathan's life? How to avenge him? Supreme Lord of Original Sin, who had his eyes closed for a long time, suddenly opened them. It was him who offered to put Nathan at risk. He had prepared everything thoroughly, but he did not expect this mistake to occur at the last moment. Supreme Lord of Original Sin invested too much effort on him that he wouldn't just watch his own son die without due justice. Hearing his grievance, Master Feng uttered, "Wait a little longer. As long as our enemy wouldn't act to damage Nathan's body, there is still a chance for Supreme Lord Lester to resurrect him." Supreme Lord Lester's heavenly destiny used for resurrecting the dead was extremely powerful. As long as the corpse was intact and without heavy damages, it had a high possibility to be completely brought back to life. But looking at the current situation, Maha might not even give him this opportunity. At this point, Supreme Lord of Original Sin was already in a violent rage. Being the leader of the 4 great clans and known to be one of the top-ranked Supreme Lords in the evolutionary universe, he deeply felt a sense of desolation and resentment in his heart given that he wasn't able to protect his own son. He couldn't even act on his own regardless of his incomparably powerful strength in consideration of the general interest of everyone. Meanwhile, within the Sunflower Water world, Maha casually waved his hand and the purple light retreated like a tide, continuously gathering in his hand. After he stopped performing the Grand World technique, there were several human martial artists who flew towards the top of the hill. These human martial artists didn't come for Maha or Connie, but their only target was Nathan's body. Previously, some others had failed when they challenged Maha, causing their death. If their bodies were still unscathed and unharmed, other martial artists would come collect them. At that time, Maha didn't try to stop those martial artists and allowed them to take away the bodies. But it was different this time. He wouldn't allow these martial artists to collect Nathan's body. He brandished his long blade slightly, and several rays of golden light shot out. Puff, puff, puff. On the other side, the martial artists were advancing on their goal, which was to collect Nathan's body, but were suddenly forced back. Several rays of golden light unexpectedly shot down from the sky, making them halt and retreat their steps. One of the martial artists angrily looked up at the source of the attack and shouted, "Maha! Don't go too far. You have already killed Nathan, and we're just taking his body back." "Oh, really?" Maha's face cracked a smile. He slowly descended from the sky, releasing an aura which frightened all of the martial artists present. None of them dared to make a move, and they only heard Maha continue to speak, "I will allow you to collect the corpses of the others. But for this corpse, you can't take it away." "Why?" The martial artist was taken by surprise by the sudden statement and angrily questioned. "My pets are hungry, and I'm going to feed this young man's corpse to them," Maha casually replied. He laughed and at the same time clapped his hands. In a flash, a martial artist flew out from the Iron Moon City carrying a spirit beast bag on his hand. With a light pat, several tall and sturdy wolf-shaped creatures rushed out from the spirit beast bag. These wolf-shaped creatures looked extremely fearsome. Their silver fur glittered, making them appear intelligent. After they emerged from the spirit beast bag, they knelt down towards Maha and then held with their heads held up high. They appeared to be fawning over him. Maha in turn reached out his hand to caress the head of one of the wolf-shaped creatures. He lazily pointed to Nathan's corpse, and his next words made these martial artists beyond shocked. He said, "You can pig out today. That is a godly genius of this universe. His body contains the aura of godly way. Devouring it will be beneficial for all of you." These wolf-shaped creatures seemed to have understood what Maha meant and immediately revealed a covetous expression. Their claws extended as they dug at the ground, implying that they were eager to have a taste. However, without Maha's permission, they just stood on their spots and didn't dare dash forward to devour the corpse. "How could you let these beasts eat our godly genius corpse?" The human martial artist snapped at Maha with an indignant expression on his face. Before Nathan went to the Sunflower Water world, these human martial artists already had prepared some plans. In the event where Supreme Lord Helm failed to pull Nathan's body back with the space lock, he could only ask others to take his corpse back to the Deadwater world. These martial artists had shouldered this mission. They never imagined that Maha would not even give them a chance to fulfill it. Maha faintly glanced at the martial artist. His gaze caused the martial artist to feel somewhat uncomfortable, as if he had seen through his thoughts. Maha's next words again made him feel hateful towards him. "The loser has no dignity, let alone a corpse. It's already an honor for it to be able to feed my pets." Maha then stood straight and waved his hand at the wolf-shaped creatures, saying, "Go, have it." After giving the order, he turned to leave without looking back. Those human martial artists immediately got anxious. Their leader's eyes flashed with a fierce light. He took out a short blade and dashed forward, aiming at the wolf-shaped creatures. Looking at their leader initiating an attack, these martial artists were about to follow suit, but the originally well-behaved wolf-shaped creatures all at once became fierce. Waves of fiendish aura rushed out from these creatures, and their silver fur began to dance like streaks of silver flame. Grr! Being provoked, the wolf-shaped creatures didn't miss any minute and charged to the human martial artists at an extremely fast speed. These human martial artists were all world lords with powerful strength. Yet, in comparison to the wolf-shaped creatures, they failed to resist against them. They were taken aback by the sudden change of events, and before they realized their situation, those wolf-shaped creatures had already bitten off their necks. One head after another rolled down the hill with their eyes wide open in disbelief. They lost their lives just like that. They died unjustly. Maha cast back a glance and softly sighed. The silver moon wolf is no ordinary spiritual pet. How can it be so easy to snatch food from super legendary beasts' mouths? After he uttered such words, endless regret flashed on his face as he continued walking down the hill, leaving a horrendous sight. Connie, who was patiently waiting beside him, stepped forward, draped a silver robe over Maha's shoulders, and then urged him to rest. Back on the hill, having killed the world lords, the silver moon wolves turned back to look at Nathan's corpse. These silver moon wolves were the most outstanding spiritual pets of the sacred race known as the powerful super legendary beasts. They were no ordinary beast belonging to the extremely pure super legendary beast's bloodline. They wouldn't just randomly eat any common world lords' bodies. Those common world lords' bodies were way inferior to Nathan's corpse. It contained a thick aura of the godly way, and was eminently attractive to the silver moon wolves. They continued to move forward towards Nathan's body and were about to pounce on it, but forced to a halt. An exceedingly formidable aura was suddenly emitted. A scorching white space crack appeared in the sky just above the hill. Stop! An explosive shout resounded from the space crack as an exceptionally strong aura emitted. Sensing this power, the silver moon wolves whimpered in surrender as they retreated backwards out of their animal instincts. They felt that if they didn't back away in an instant, they would die for sure. In the dead water world, Supreme Lord of Original Sin was seething. In a rush, he constructed an incandescent space channel in front of him. With his strength, he would easily smash those silver moon wolves into pieces once he entered it. No, buddy, that's not a good idea. Whoosh. The Patriarch of the G clan and the Patriarch of the Lai clan, together with Supreme Lord of Thunder Punishment, stood in front of Supreme Lord of Original Sin in unison. If you act recklessly, you will drag the entire universe into an irreparable calamity. Supreme Lord of Original Sin, please think twice. Chapter 1664, Rules. Supreme Lord of Original Sin was known to be a highly intelligent individual. From the start, he knew the risks of stepping into the Sunflower Water world. He would trigger a powerful counterattack from the sacred race. Even though he was a top-ranked Supreme Lord, the chances of him dying in the Sunflower Water world were quite strong, unlimited even. However, he couldn't simply stand by and watch his own son's corpse being devoured by the blood-hungry wolves. With other Supreme Lords, Persuasion, Supreme Lord of Original Sin hesitated. Simultaneously though, other things were happening in the Sunflower Water world, too. In the air above, several blood-red space cracks had begun to appear. The thin cracks streaked across the sky, intertwining with each other and spreading at rapid speed. Faint shadows swayed among the rays of dark red light emanating from the cracks. A great power gushed from the cracks. The sacred Supreme Lords were hiding within them. Inevitably, this scene caused Supreme Lord of Original Sin to waken from his sullen stupor. He knew that, many times, anger wasn't the solution to the problem. If he rushed into the Sunflower Water world now, the best outcome would probably be his death at the hands of the sacred Supreme Lords. If he died in that world, then the four great clans wouldn't be capable of operating star-destroying array together. This would cause a great reduction in the strength of the human race. Even worse, it could cause the whole sacred race to launch an attack. This was definitely something he wanted to avoid. In such a situation, the possibility of humankind actually winning was so low that it could lead to the destruction of the entire universe. Supreme Lord of Original Sin weighed the pros and cons and chose to be prudent. Sizzle, sizzle, the space crack that Supreme Lord of Original Sin had created with his grand teleportation technique had closed unexpectedly. The aura that had been pulsating outward had completely vanished as well, leaving no trace behind. And that wasn't all. Once Supreme Lord of Original Sin's space crack had disappeared, the blood-red cracks that had streaked the sky above quickly followed suit and vanished too. Now that the sacred warriors had gained the upper hand, they weren't anxious about their next move. As long as the Supreme Lords of the human race didn't take action, the sacred Supreme Lords had no reason to act rashly either. They thus had the time to make precise, calculated decisions. And if Maha remained inside the sunflower water world, he would be capable of suppressing the universe's momentum with ease. This strategy could do more than just erase the malice of the entire evolutionary universe toward the sacred race. It could also restrain the heavens-suppressing object in Master Feng's hands. From this point of view, clearly, it was the humans that had to worry. Once Maha slipped into his silver robe, he slowly walked toward Iron Moon City. Although he didn't stay in his original location or even turn around to give it a second glance, Maha was more than aware of what was going on behind him. That Supreme Lord really has a high tolerance level, Maha said, as he smiled faintly at Connie. Connie curled her lips, which made her eyes brighten. What a pity, she said. If Supreme Lord of Original Sin were to rush over in rage, then he would be giving Maha exactly what he wanted, exactly what he came for. It doesn't matter anymore. Let's see just how much they can really endure, and whether or not they will be willing to send the godly geniuses over one by one. As Maha spoke, he confidently wrapped his arm around Connie's small waist and walked into Iron Moon City with her. The Silver Moon Wolves charged forward and gnawed on Nathan's corpse. This top talent of the evolutionary universe was devoured by the Silver Moon Wolves in the blink of an eye. The wolves had a rough sense of the godly way aura in the corpse, and they all let out a long howl at the sky, revealing satisfied grins of sharp teeth as they obediently returned to the spirit beast bag. As the human martial artists in Iron Moon City saw the bloody show, their faces warped with grief and indignation. To humans, this was destined to be great humiliation. The problem was that they couldn't do anything about it. The sacred race was simply too powerful. The strongest godly genius of the sacred race was actually invincible. In the face of such emotion and terror, humans could always bring out their most powerful potential and produce strong resistance. Right now, in Iron Moon City, the Demon Knight warriors, the human warriors, the ogres, and the warriors of the smaller races, all remained silent. On their gloomy faces was etched a form of resilience, as if they were volcanoes just waiting to erupt at any given moment. Not too long afterward, Supreme Lord of Oracle's voice resounded throughout the evolutionary universe. Nathan's death also had another use: to arouse the common hatred of all the living beings in the universe. Just like Maha had guessed, he didn't need to announce Nathan's death publicly. He could rest assured, for he knew that the human Supreme Lords would definitely take care of the matter for him. Prior to this, many living creatures in the universe already knew that Nathan was entering the Sunflower Water world in order to challenge Maha, and Maha seemed to be at a disadvantage. Ever since then though, the universe had maintained its silence. No one had informed them of the event's updates. The living creatures were thus all ears, just waiting to be given even the slightest news. Countless warriors had been paying attention to the matter for a long time, and yet, no one had heard anything from anyone. Until Supreme Lord of Oracle's voice was suddenly heard booming throughout the entire universe. I am Supreme Lord of Oracle. I am representing the human race in order to announce news. Nathan has been killed by Maha. On behalf of the human race and the evolutionary universe, I hope that stronger talents will come forth and stand for our revenge. Truth be told, there was only one or two warriors in the younger generation that were stronger than Nathan. One of them was Zen, and the other was Rocher. Currently, Rocher was in closed-door seclusion, and Zen had just taken care of things with the Demon Knight. There was literally nobody else they could count on. The reason she said this was in an attempt to provide comfort to the countless living beings within the evolutionary universe. More importantly, she tried inspiring everyone and anyone who was listening. As Supreme Lord of Oracle's cold and moving voice echoed throughout the universe, all the races and intelligent life forms across the land threw themselves into an uproar. There's no way Nathan actually lost to that Maha. Someone exclaimed. This Maha is truly an undefeatable existence. Someone else shouted in agreement. Does this mean that we have to send a Supreme Lord to fight him? Zen, we want Zen to fight. For a moment, the entire evolutionary universe was filled with righteous indignation as people yelled and shouted out over one another. Supreme Lord of Oracle's voice was heard by everyone in the universe, including Zen, of course. After making amends with the Demon Knight's internal strife, Zen had come into the lower world in order to retrieve the great weighty sword. This sword could withstand Zen's power, making it a very suitable weapon for him. However, once it flew out of his hand, nothing in nature had the capacity to bear its weight, so it seeped all the way down into the lower world and the deepest parts of the earth. It would only stop when it came into direct contact with the boundary of the evolutionary universe, known as the Sighing Wall. Once the righteous sword was in his possession, Zen activated the teleportation token and came to the Sunflower Water world. Lavender, Supreme Lord Leia and a few of the other Demon Knight members had already set off for the Dead Water world to meet up with the human Supreme Lords. After entering the Sunflower Water world, Zen quickly and effortlessly chose a direction to go in. With a flash of the space law beneath his feet, he successfully crossed hundreds of miles in seconds. If one were to observe Zen from a high vantage point, they would see him blinking like a star, repeatedly using the grand teleportation in order to maintain his extremely high speed as he moved toward the center of the Sunflower Water world. Nathan has already died, but I don't know if his corpse has been destroyed or not. Would Supreme Lord Lester's heavenly destiny of revival be able to revive him? Zen wondered. As Zen hurried on his way, he weighed the matter in his mind. Previously, Carl had been torn to shreds and nearly killed by the sorcerer race's Angel of Death. Later, however, he was saved by Supreme Lord Lester. If Zen could at least get a hold of Nathan's corpse, then he knew he had chances of saving him, even if they were slim. What he didn't know though, was what condition Nathan was in. If he had already been burned to ashes, he wouldn't know if it would be possible for Supreme Lord Lester to save him with heavenly destiny of revival. Boom! As Zen continued rushing along his way, he was surprised by a bolt of lightning that exploded directly before him. Not too far off, he noticed two martial artists fighting. His eyes narrowed suddenly. One of them is a sacred warrior, Zen thought, his brow creasing slightly as his body floated into the air and sped toward the two martial artists. The Sunflower Water world had already become a huge battle ring. The sacred and human warriors would constantly challenge each other within the Sunflower Water world. As Zen watched these two people fight, he quickly noted that the sacred warrior had the upper hand. As for the human Grand World Lord, he was completely suppressed by his opponent. Come on! The sacred warrior shot out a brown bolt of lightning at the human martial artist. The bolt hit the human with great unexpected force and he was instantly nailed to the ground. Ha ha ha! Inferior races are so useless. Go to perdition! Cried the sacred warrior. Just as he was about to take his final action and end the human Grand World Lord's life, he summoned a golden bolt of lightning that descended from the sky high above. The human Grand World Lord was currently unable to move. All that was left was to close his eyes and await his death. However, the lightning bolt was miraculously stopped in midair. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the air. The odd figure stretched out its hand and cut the golden lightning in half with a single motion. The thick golden lightning bolt turned into thin lightning snakes, spreading out in all directions along Zen's arms. Zen, on the other hand, smiled faintly at his opponent and said, "Since victory and defeat have already been decided, there's no need to slaughter anyone, isn't it? Who are you? How dare you interfere with my challenge? Doing so is completely against the rules." The sacred warrior's face became cold. There weren't any large-scale battles occurring in the Sunflower Water world at the moment. The human and sacred warriors simply hated each other. Generally speaking, the winner of the battle would kill their opponent directly on the spot. It was a two-way street. No one else could interfere, and everyone knew this very well. It was an unwritten rule. Zen interfering in the fight right after his arrival truly was against the rules. Chapter 1665, The Rules Set by Maha. As Zen hightailed over to the place, he witnessed two martial artists battling it out. On the sidelines, human and sacred warriors alike had their eyes glued to the fight, their gazes alight with interest. Zen deduced that the two martial artists were engaged in a one-on-one battle. But his aim in rushing over to the Sunflower Water world was not to become another spectator to the battle, but rather he had to put an end to the challenge posed by Maha. As for the unwritten rule, he had no intention of abiding by it. Only the weak ones obeyed rules. The strong ones called the shots and created the law. They were brave enough to break them when need be. Boy, are you courting death? In the Sunflower Water world, you can only indulge in a one-on-one fight. Otherwise, our sacred race would have long since exterminated your human race. If you are wise enough, you will run from here with your tail tucked between your legs. As the sacred martial artists noticed Zen step closer, their voices rose to a clamor. Who made this rule? Zen glanced around slowly as he rubbed his fingertips together. It has been set by our godly genius, Maha, and rightly so. One of the martial artists spat out arrogantly. Most of the human martial artists who entered the Sunflower Water world intended to confront and challenge Maha. However, there were simply too many of these human adversaries. It was impossible for Maha to fight them individually by himself. Thus, the sacred martial artists lent a hand in fighting them. The corner of Zen's mouth curled up slightly. So that's how it is. I see. Yes, that's how it is. Now make yourself scarce. A sacred martial artist shouted. Zen shook his head, but that is Maha's rule, not mine. The martial artist spluttered at this unexpected reply. And pray tell, what is your rule? He asked incredulously. The sacred martial artists present were clueless as to how they should react to this dissenter. Their race had the absolute advantage in the sunflower water world, and the human martial artists who challenged the sacred warriors were mindful of it, which was why they were usually compliant with the rules. My rule is not to follow any rule while fighting the sacred race. As he finished speaking, Zen's eyes narrowed in timely warning. Swiftly, his figure flew in the air like a nimble swallow and shot toward that sacred warrior. The sacred warrior had not imagined that Zen would dare make a move such as this. His vision blurred and turned hazy as Zen flashed past him. Zen had stunned the sacred warrior. Before the latter could even react, an ice soul flame bloomed on his chest and rapidly trickled into his body. A cold chill pervaded his insides inch by slow inch, spreading through his meridians until it finally invaded his deep inner world. The inner world of the sacred martial artist was engulfed in ice and snow. As the temperature plummeted even more, a number of creatures within froze into chunks of ice. Along with the living beings formed out of life vitality, the martial artist's own life vitality sea-iced over. Caught unawares in this situation, he was unable to activate his life vitality or use a cultivation method to resist the insidious chill. Within moments, the ice soul flame blazed with incredible intensity, devouring his entire body. Before the others knew it, the sacred martial artist's body had turned into a solid ice sculpture. The shocked expression on his face, now frozen forever, was jarring to witness. How dare you? You dared launch a sneak attack. Brothers, let's kill this human warrior. Zen had caught the sacred martial artists completely off guard. They would have never expected a human warrior to have the audacity to launch an attack on one of them out of the blue. After all, the sacred race dominated the sunflower water world. They had never come across such a foolhardy human, who was willing to butt horns with a mightier adversary. Evidently, the ice soul flame in Zen's hand was extraordinary, but they still pounced on Zen in anger, for they had a clear advantage in terms of numbers. The human martial artists, on the other hand, watched wide-eyed as Zen stunned his opponent. Thoroughly impressed, they wondered where Zen had come from. Not only was he strong, he was also proving to be more talented and arrogant than the sacred warriors themselves. Just as these human warriors were hesitating on whether they should help Zen out or not, the latter bolted to the sacred warriors to stun them. His body was like a ghost and the ice soul flame in his palm was alluring like a bewitching flower. Each time he passed by a sacred warrior, his other hand brushed the ice soul flame lightly. The azure ice flame transferred onto the bodies of the opponent warriors where it spread dangerously, simultaneously unleashing the unstoppable chill. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sacred martial artists tried to fight back, but they could not even reach him. Each of them turned into ice sculptures, raging ice flames wildly burning around them. The scene was daunting. Zen sauntered out from between these ice sculptures, a faint smirk hanging on his lips. He could kill the sacred world lords so easily, which bewildered the human martial artists. As they saw Zen walk out, they could not help but stumble a few steps back, their faces revealing the reverence they felt deep down. How far is Iron Moon City from here? Zen asked without ceremony. About 2 million miles, a human martial artist replied. This warrior too had the cultivation base of World Lord, but before Zen he felt that he was far inferior, as if he was facing a supreme lord. Thank you. Zen nodded. The sole of his foot tapped against the ground before his body circled up like a bird, using the grand teleportation technique to journey forward. After Zen left, the human martial artists breathed a collective sigh of relief. He is truly a World Lord. Even an ordinary Grand World Lord would be unable to do such a thing. Could it be that he is a godly genius? Humph, are you all blind? He was Zen. A human warrior had immediately identified Zen. Zen had once challenged the talents of the universe in a painting of the illusion battlefield, for which reason many in the universe were well aware of his appearance. The journey to the divine refinement Forbidden Land had done wonders for Zen's cultivation base and had made it soar. His aura had undergone a drastic change. Surprisingly, some of the human warriors had not recognized him despite his popularity. Now that Zen's identity was pointed out, these warriors got excited. I cannot believe he was Zen. He has cultivated to such a high level. His method with the ice attribute was particularly terrifying. I believe he is currently making his way to the Iron Moon City to challenge Maha. It will be a good show. Let's head to the city. Thrilled at the prospect of witnessing the battle, the human warriors also flew toward Iron Moon City, following Zen. An ordinary mortal would never be equipped to cross a distance of 2 million miles in their lifetime. But for world lords, the stretch was quite short. After traveling for about 5 minutes, a range of bumpy hills appeared before Zen. As his calm eyes scanned the scenery slowly, he saw that at the end of the hills lay a city in the shape of a crescent moon, built around the hills rather picturesquely. Whoosh! Zen put his foot forward and entered Iron Moon City in a flash of blazing white light. No city lord resided in Iron Moon City anymore. The no-fly ban and divine textures that were originally installed here had long since been abandoned. In fact, even if these prohibitions were once again activated, they would not be able to stop the fierce and ambitious world lords. Currently, Iron Moon City was filled to capacity with world lords from both the human race and the sacred race. A section of the warriors had come merely to watch the battles among the world lords, but most of them were there to participate in the fights themselves. They reveled in provoking and challenging each other. After Maha had killed Nathan, the sacred martial artists become rather vainglorious. They took pleasure in goading the martial artists of other races in Iron Moon City. As for the martial artists of the human race, the demon knight race, and the ogre race, they were only indignant and eager to take action at any moment. As soon as Zen stepped into the place, he attracted the attention of several sacred martial artists. It is a new human world lord. Ha ha, someone roared, booming in raucous laughter. Humphrey, go challenge him. Let me try. The sacred martial artists had similar condescending smiles on their faces as they stared at Zen. One of them strode toward him. Hello, human brat, have you come to Iron Moon City for? Before the sacred martial artist could even finish his question, Zen passed by him indifferently. The moment he did so, a blue ice flower fell on the warrior's shoulder. Zen looked rather placid. The ice soul flame burned with intensity. Before any of the sacred martial artists could realize what was happening, Zen had already increased his speed. The ice soul flame was like the sickle of death in Zen the Grim Reaper. He wasted no time in taking the lives of these sacred martial artists. Puff, puff, puff. One after another, the ice soul flames began to bloom. They stirred in the air, releasing distinct sounds. In the bat of an eye, the group of 7 sacred warriors turned into motionless ice sculptures. Zen did not slow down in the slightest as the warriors fell to the ground. He continued to go deeper into Iron Moon City. Because of his action, Zen attracted the attention of the martial artists in Iron Moon City. Another group of sacred world lords stormed out, and as they took in what had happened, they were utterly furious. Countless challenges had occurred outside of Iron Moon City, but this human martial artist before them had broken the cardinal rule. They could not possibly tolerate such impudence from a human world lord. Chapter 1666, Ice Sculptures. With the icy blue flame gripped in his hand, Zen killed all approaching enemies as he traveled in the Iron Moon City. Any martial artists who stood in his way were left to fend for themselves against the ice flame. Only a few martial artists had the ability of using the fire law to resist the ice soul flame for a while. However, the ice soul flame was a mystery comprehended by a holy being. It was actually what made Holy J famous. How in the world could these sacred world lords resist it in the end? A warrior who cultivated the fire law produced golden flames and managed to resist the ice soul flame. It didn't last long though, and the fire was soon consumed by the ice soul flame, and the inner world in his cinnabar field was completely frozen. He could only stare at Zen with pleading eyes. Zen's movement gradually slowed as he took a look at the sacred martial artist. In his eyes, the sacred martial artist was quickly wrapped up by the ice soul flame and turned into an ice sculpture. There seemed to be no breaths or signs of life in him anymore. Once he got closer, Zen lightly tapped the ice sculpture with his index finger. In an instant, countless cracks began to form across the frozen body, which eventually shattered into a pile of ice on the ground. What a bold move from this kid. This guy actually dared to attack us at the Iron Moon City. Kill him. Zen's actions brought attention to half of the sacred warriors in the Iron Moon City. One after another, they rushed towards the street and quickly surrounded Zen. It's Zen, someone shouted. He has arrived at the Iron Moon City. Another screamed. The current Zen is so strong now. A few years ago, he was only at the Soul Sea realm. Now, he can kill a world lord with just a wave of his hand. The humans and warriors from various races finally recognized Zen, and some world lords who recognized him had all sorts of feelings that welled up inside their hearts. Back in the illusion battlefield, Zen was still a mere Soul Sea realm martial artist, while they had already been world lords for hundreds or even thousands of years. In a span of a few years, he attained so much power which was hard to comprehend. There were around 70 sacred warriors gathered in front of Zen, all of whom were world lords. However, when they saw the ice sculptures of the sacred warriors behind Zen, no one dared to charge forward. Hearing his name made them even more flustered. Zen was the strongest godly genius in the evolutionary universe, a title that was well deserved. He might not be as strong as Maha, but he was definitely stronger than any ordinary world lord known. Seeing all these sacred martial artists, Zen was still indifferent. He raised his right hand, and the fist-sized ice soul flame suddenly flickered. The wispy blue flame shot into the sky, which instantly lowered the temperature of the entire Iron Moon City. As for the sacred martial artists, they all took a step back and watched in awe. It turns out that sacred warriors are also so afraid of death, Zen said calmly. Hearing this brought much displeasure to the martial artists. One of them, a tall fellow, stood up and said, "Zen, if you want to challenge us, then let's head up the mountain. One-on-one, how about it?" Zen took one look at the martial artist and glared. He had a temper, and he didn't care about any rules when facing sacred martial artists. "I accept the challenge," Zen said with a smile, "but I will fight a group of you, alone." As Zen finished his words, a piercing golden light shot out from his eyes. The Emperor's soul imprint within his gold-fighting soul let out an intense energy. This aura was not in line with Zen's natural temperament, but it was enough to greatly suppress world lords. This technique was even comparable to Maha's great dominance technique. A majestic aura began to spread out and all of the sacred martial artists felt their souls being suppressed. Some got headaches, some lost vision, and some were borderline about to faint. At the same time, Zen's figure flashed as he grabbed the ice soul flame in his hand and shot toward the sacred martial artists. Whoosh! He did not hesitate at all. The moment he approached them, he immediately swept the ice soul flame past them and let the wispy flames engulf them. In the blink of an eye, the ice soul flame took over all their bodies. Within seconds, most of the sacred martial artists were consumed in the ice soul flame. Only a handful of them had powerful soul forces and were quick enough to use grand teleportation to escape. Crackle, crackle, the icy blue ice soul flame emitted a beautiful, cold glow as it danced around the martial artists in harmony. As this happened, the temperature in Iron Moon City plummeted once again. The Sunflower Water World used to be a place where spring reigned throughout the years. But as of the moment, it was as if the Iron Moon City turned into a land of extreme chillness. Most warriors and mortals were shivering, rubbing their hands together in search for warmth. As for the human world lords behind Zen, they could only stare at him with their mouths wide open. There were so many sacred world lords who planned to attack Zen. Initially, they planned to help him, but they didn't expect that all of the sacred world lords would be turned into ice sculptures in such a short time. This fellow is inconceivably strong. He's powerful, no doubt. He has the strength of a supreme lord, but he doesn't have a heavenly destiny. Are you stupid? Zen is already a godly genius. If he cultivated the godly way, then he would be more powerful than anyone with heavenly destiny. Ha ha ha, Maha couldn't be trying to escape with his tail between his legs, right? All the human warriors who were in shock began to cheer him on. Those martial artists who came to Sunflower Water World to challenge the sacred warriors were usually calm and brave. They weren't afraid of death, but were afraid of dying cowards. Now, after being suppressed by the sacred race for so long, Zen finally gave them a sense of hope. After all the martial artists were turned into ice, Zen stomped his foot and a huge power erupted. It was as if a huge meteor crashed into the Iron Moon City, causing the entire city to shake. This vibration rippled like a wave and made its way towards the ice sculptures. Just then, like the first sculpture they witnessed, cracks appeared on the bodies and all the frozen figures shattered into pieces. At this moment, Zen exhaled slightly, and turned to one of the human warriors, "Where is Nathan's corpse?" When the human warrior heard Zen's question, he tried his best to hide his excitement and pointed towards the hill at the side of Iron Moon City. "Over there, but it's very likely that there wouldn't be much left. It might have been divided by the wolves." Zen's brow furrowed in disappointment as he heard this. He instantly ran out of Iron Moon City and landed on the hill. As he narrowed his eyes, he caught sight of 4 silver wolves. Just as the warrior said, Nathan's body had already been devoured by these silver wolves. Not much was left behind except blood and bones. Zen's blood began to boil at the sight of this. At the start of it all, Nathan and Zen were enemies. However, they soon found a common ground and formed a camaraderie like no other. Seeing Nathan getting feasted on was a sight he couldn't bear to see. He was sad and angry, and Zen rarely felt this. He rose into the sky and fell down like a shooting star, smashing straight towards the Silver Moon Wolves. It turned out, the Silver Moon Wolves were super legendary beasts. Although they were not fully grown, they were still incredibly strong. The moment Zen appeared in the air, they caught sight of him and lowered their bodies. The wolves placed their heads close to the ground, staring at him with their eyes. Oh! Before Zen could even get close, the Silver Moon Wolves already had a plan. They leapt up into the air all together, and began biting towards Zen's neck, arms, and legs. These Silver Moon Wolves' teeth flashed with a metallic luster, and the tips of their teeth were extremely sharp. They could definitely break any divine weapon once it got in between their teeth. Ordinary world lords stood no chance against them. The wolves were smart, thinking they could tear Zen into shreds. But they underestimated him, mistaking him for a mere human. Crack 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 crack. With a few crisp sounds, Zen let the Silver Moon Wolves bite him. However, the wolves soon noticed that they couldn't hurt him. One of the Silver Moon Wolves even had 2 of its teeth broken. Chapter 1667, Worry. They're just as stupid as other ordinary beasts. Zen's hand shot out and grabbed at a Silver Moon Wolf's head. The Silver Moon Wolf's reaction, however, was extremely quick, and with a haphazard roll, it managed to evade Zen's attack. As soon as it righted itself, it roared and clawed at Zen's face. It had discovered that Zen's body was indestructible, so it shifted his attention to Zen's face instead. The other 3 Silver Moon Wolves bit Zen, intent on drawing him away. Oh! A trace of surprise appeared on Zen's face before he let out a sinister laugh. The power of the 9 stars gushed out crazily, and with a slight twist of his body, a wave of power formed into a vortex that revolved wildly around him. A cracking sound was heard as the 4 Silver Moon Wolves got caught in the vortex. In a blink of an eye, the heads, fur, and bones of the Silver Moon Wolves were cut to pieces. Zen stood at the center of the remains and calmly waved his hand. A faint light flashed from his space ring and absorbed the fragments of the Silver Moon Wolves. Earlier, Karl had also been blown into bits by the Angel of Death from the Sorcerer race, but was resurrected by Supreme Lord Lester. Zen assumed that while Nathan had been devoured by the Silver Moon Wolves, the beasts did not have time to absorb his flesh fragments. If the Celestial Position members could separate Nathan's fragments from those of the Silver Moon Wolves, then they'd have a chance to revive him. And while it didn't seem very much, this was the only thing Zen could do. Whether or not Nathan could be saved depended on his own luck. As Zen slowly descended onto a protruding rock, his gaze landed on the Iron Moon City. When he was dealing with the Silver Moon Wolves, he had also been on guard for a sneak attack by Maha. However, Maha didn't show up at all, causing Zen to be even more vigilant. On the other side of the Iron Moon City, a magnificent palace stood. It had been originally the City Lord's mansion, but when Maha came to the Sunflower Water World and killed the City Lord, the mansion became Maha's palace. Inside the mansion, steam rose from a boiling pool of brown water and filled the air with a strong herbal fragrance. The water's temperature, above boiling point, was enough to melt any ordinary being in an instant. However, the 2 naked figures that were currently immersed in the pool were unbothered by it. Maha leaned his back on the edge of the pool as he stared absently at the ceiling. Lost in his thoughts, he barely noticed Connie rest her head on the crook of his neck. Neither of them used any protective life vitality to resist the heat of the medicinal liquid. The scalding water was hot on their skin but was incredibly refreshing. Zen seems to be a bit impatient, Maha said flatly. Connie scooped up some water in her cupped hand and gently poured it on Maha's chest. Don't be careless, she said softly. He's strong, much stronger than Nathan. Connie had been defeated by both Zen and Nathan. But while the 2 men had overpowered her, they gave off completely different vibes. She was able to exchange blows with Nathan and she knew instantly that the man was not invincible. If she had gone all out on him, she would have surely beat him. Zen, on the other hand, gave her a completely different feeling. She almost had no strength to fight him back, and had Zen been serious during their fight, she had no doubt the man could have killed her with a single strike. The pressure she felt then was so much stronger than when she had faced the Supreme Lords. Maha caressed Connie's face, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Are you worried I won't be his match? I'm not looking down on you. Connie hurriedly explained. Maha was a conceited person and she didn't want to say anything that would displease him. To her surprise, Maha's smile melted off his face and said something uncharacteristic. I'm not confident about winning the battle with Zen, he confessed. I fear he might be the strongest opponent that I'll ever face in my life. Under certain conditions, Maha was able to kill a Supreme Lord. And according to what he just said, he believed Zen was just as powerful as one. Connie was stunned. She never thought that Maha, who had always been overconfident, would actually give Zen such an evaluation. She worried Zen would kill Maha, and she found herself greatly upset at the thought of losing her lover. But I will definitely win, Maha assured her, his finger coming up to touch her nose. He then pulled himself out from the pool and nonchalantly walked to the other side of the room. Connie followed suit. With a flick of her wrist, a towel wrapped itself around her body and a robe hung itself on Maha's. Meanwhile, Zen stood outside the Iron Moon City, calmly surveying the surrounding area. The human martial artists, as well as the sacred martial artists in the Iron Moon City, were also quietly waiting. As world lords, they had vast knowledge and experience. In a vision, they would see the entire universe in turmoil after the battle between Maha and Zen. No matter the victor, the sacred supreme lords hiding in the Sunflower Water world would all take action. If Zen really succeeds in killing Maha, then the sacred supreme lords would take revenge on him. We're fully prepared. If the sacred supreme lords aren't afraid of death, then they can launch the attack. I am ready to lay down my life for the evolutionary universe. All the warriors in the evolutionary universe understood the current situation and were more than willing to defend their home. After the invasion of this universe, none of the warriors from the human race and other races stayed silent. This was a matter of life and death, and concerned all living beings in the universe. Not long after, the City Lord's mansion opened its gates and a lone figure walked out. Maha was fully dressed now. The smile that hung on his face moments ago was gone and was now replaced by a serene expression. When veteran warriors faced a battle of life and death, they all had this calm aura. From the palace garden, Connie's lips pursed unconsciously as she watched Maha walk away. Maha hasn't been this serious in a long time. Although she had confidence in Maha's strength, there was an extreme feeling of worry that she just couldn't shake off. Because of Zen's gruesome attack, the sacred martial artists present kept quiet out of fear. They deduced that only Maha had the chance to defeat such a formidable talent like Zen. At this time, they looked forward to seeing Maha more than Zen. Do your best, Maha. Kill that godly genius. Avenge us. Zen has a powerful ice flame in his hand. Be careful, Maha. The sacred martial artists marched beside Maha as he walked along the road, giving him words of encouragement and caution. Maha nodded his head once in response before he took a step forward and instantly appeared at the top of the hill. He eyed Zen warily from his place. This is the third time we've met. For the first time they met, there wasn't anything remarkable about Zen, and Maha was able to defeat the boy with just a finger. For the second time they met, Zen had improved greatly. Maha had wanted a supreme lord to kill him then, but by sheer dumb luck, Zen had managed to escape. Now that he had crossed paths with Zen for the third time, he couldn't help but notice the sense of danger growing in his heart. He tried to suppress the feeling as it only reminded him that this person had the strength to kill him. Maha also understood that he couldn't wait any longer. Zen had progressed quickly. Even when Maha went to the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land to cultivate before, he hadn't improved as much as Zen had. If he missed this opportunity to kill Zen now, he'd be facing an undefeatable monster in the future. Chapter 1668. Test the waters. Because he practiced the Great Dominance technique, Maha's movements gave off a strong sense of oppression. An ordinary warrior would feel great pressure facing Maha and their first instinct would be to submit to him without question. However, because of his cultivation level, Maha's Great Dominance technique had no effect on the gold-fighting soul. The Emperor's soul imprint in Zen's soul also contained an aura that was by no means weaker than the Great Dominance technique. Zen was calm as he faced Maha. I believe this will be the last time we meet. Maha smiled and nodded. Yes, I think so too. The two of them were the representatives of their respective universes, the two strongest martial artists second only to Supreme Lords. As a war broke out between these two universes, a fight between the two of them was unavoidable. Maha clenched his right hand into a fist and rubbed his left palm. He then gently stepped in the air and took the initiative to launch an attack. Words were of no use to Maha. He merely focused on dealing the deadly blow on Zen. He was determined to crush him along with the hopes and dreams that this entire universe pinned onto the young man. He did not even bother using a weapon. Maha simply went for Zen with his bare hands. Whoosh, whoosh. In terms of speed or the burst of strength, Maha's attack was nothing special. However, Zen saw the space behind Maha slightly shift and distort. When formidable strength was exerted on a warrior's body, their mass would in turn rise exponentially. Upon reaching a certain point, it would then start to suppress their surroundings and distort the space around them. Zen was no stranger to this phenomenon, having experienced the same thing many times. It was just a bit surprising to see it done by Maha too. What powerful strength, Zen remarked in his head. He never knew Maha could be this strong, and it didn't help that he had no idea where this sort of strength came from. However, despite facing against such a powerful opponent, Zen felt extremely excited. Since Maha wanted to fight with brute force alone, then Zen would not hesitate to do the same. His punch wasn't very fast, and it was absolutely possible for Zen to dodge it if he wanted to. However, instead of retreating, Zen decided to lower the center of his body and took a horse stance on the rock. This Zen, he wants to take a punch from Maha head-on. Supreme Lord Barry murmured, having hidden himself in the dark. That would be too disappointing. Supreme Lord Noel said, shaking his head slightly. He overestimates himself, another Supreme Lord remarked. Since Maha was the #1 godly genius of the sacred race with unparalleled strength and power, it was only natural for the sacred Supreme Lords to watch over him during his battles. There was a time when Maha went to the heavenly melody star to refine his body. This star was one of the 9 divine stars of the Murphy universe and contained Murphy's strength source. A body refiner would be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort if they chose to refine themselves there. On this star was a cyan vitality tree that had only bloomed once in the past countless years. Its flower withered after 40 million years, while it still took it another 30 million years to produce a single fruit. Maha was able to greatly improve himself on this star since he was lucky enough to eat the cyan vitality fruit that had absorbed large amount of strength source. However, to the sacred Supreme Lords, this didn't have anything to do with luck at all. The cyan vitality fruit was a divine object that couldn't be obtained by an ordinary person's luck. It was no doubt something that Murphy willed to happen. He wanted to bestow that fruit to Maha, so he made the tree bloom and bear fruit just in time for him to take it. After consuming the fruit, Maha's strength rapidly increased to the point that the Supreme Lord's strength was now far inferior to his. This was the main reason why all the Supreme Lords were confident in the devastating power of Maha's punch. Do you think Zen is a fool? The power that Maha erupted was enough to twist space itself. Since Zen dared to forcefully resist this punch, he must be confident in his own ability. I'm afraid that Maha will suffer a loss. Supreme Lord Denzel argued with a sneer. He and Maha had originally been on different paths, so he didn't really have any amicable relationship with the godly genius. Of course, he hoped for Zen's death, but seeing Maha suffer a bit was a bonus. Striking down the strongest godly genius in the evolutionary universe was equivalent to completely destroying its momentum. In the end though, the Supreme Lord's remarks actually hit the nail on the head. Zen did not dodge and simply spread his left hand open while keeping his right hand balled into a fist. He too threw a punch towards Maha. As they both had reached such a high level of cultivation, any casual attack from these two would be powerful and perfectly executed. Since it was a head-on strike, Zen didn't even bother playing any tricks. His punch was directly aimed at Maha with no frills, since he was extremely confident of his higher physical strength level. Maha, on the other hand, thought the same thing as Supreme Lord Barry. To him, Zen had greatly overestimated himself for facing his strike head-on. It was very favorable for him to take advantage of Zen's arrogance and directly smash him to meat paste. That would save him a lot of trouble in the future. Bam! A dull sound rang out the moment their fists collided. Zen was still in the horse stance when his punch collided with Maha's. He was immediately thrown in the air while the hill he had previously been standing on was reduced to dust and rubble. On the other hand, Maha's complexion had turned a shade whiter. The amount of force he sustained from Zen's punch was much more powerful than the one he threw at him. His opponent was actually stronger than him, and the gap between the two of them was enormous. Fortunately, Maha was a vigilant warrior. As soon as he realized this fact, he quickly twisted his body and slid away from his opponent like a loach. His agile moves helped him offset Zen's strength by 80%. However, the 20% from Zen's attack that did manage to hit him still caused countless blood vessels in his body to explode. Fighting with their fists was a way to test the waters. Maha did not expect himself to suffer such a great loss. Zen, meanwhile, was very successful with his attack. However, he dared not drop his guard. Taking advantage of his opponent's disorientation, Zen suddenly grabbed Maha in an attempt to gain the upper hand. Unfortunately, Maha's strange bodily movement skills enabled him to simply slip through Zen's fingers. As he retreated, Maha spat out a mouthful of blood, forming a clear line of blood in the air. This scene shocked all the sacred Supreme Lords watching immensely. Even Supreme Lord Denzel, who had correctly predicted this outcome, was surprised. Despite guessing that Zen's strength surpassed Maha's, Supreme Lord Denzel did not expect the gap between the two to be that huge. It seemed that the strength of these two godly geniuses was on completely different levels. However, it was not enough to completely fluster the sacred Supreme Lords. Maha's injuries weren't too serious and physical strength alone was not a deciding factor to the match. After all, there were many ways to beat a stronger opponent than just brute strength. The ordinary sacred warriors, on the other hand, felt less than calm. The only thing they saw was Zen defeating Maha with a single punch. Is the battle going to end with the first punch? He only used one punch to make the godly genius bleed, unbelievable. We're finished. This Zen guy is too strong. The sacred warriors of Iron Moon City lamented while the human warriors rejoiced. Haha, no one under the level of Supreme Lord is stronger than Zen. What the heck, is this Maha really a godly genius? All it took was one punch to make him bleed. Come on, Zen. These world lords weren't content cheering on the sidelines, they also took out their precious roaring tokens and announced Zen's amazing feat to the entire evolutionary universe. This news was extremely inspiring and greatly boosted the morale of everyone in the evolutionary universe. Maha distanced himself until he was around 10,000 feet away from Zen, only then did he manage to stabilize himself and wipe the blood from his mouth. He's gonna be harder to deal with than I thought, Maha couldn't help but think to himself. This small injury was nothing, but he had to reassess Zen's strength immediately. Physical strength wasn't a necessarily critical factor in winning fights, but it still could give a warrior an edge. Since he didn't have any advantage over Zen on physical strength, Maha would be forced into a passive stance. He needed to reconsider his entire strategy. However, Zen didn't accord him that luxury. The young man suddenly raised his right hand, summoning an icy blue flame that completely wrapped around his palm. With the blazing power of the space law, a single step caused Zen to move 10,000 feet forward, just to reach behind Maha. He then raised his arm and slapped his opponent across the back. Chapter 1669, The Rampant Sword Intent. Many scenarios could happen during a battle. When a martial artist was at a disadvantage, however, it would be difficult to reverse the situation, especially if both parties' strengths were at a similar level. It was known that Maha was the #1 godly genius of the sacred race. He knew how to execute numerous methods and could think of ways to evade his opponent in the most dangerous situations. Moreover, he had extremely sharp senses and had quickly discerned that the icy blue flame was quite strange. As soon as he determined that he couldn't fight head-on against it, his body immediately sank. Thus, Zen had failed to hit him when they passed by each other in midair. The red light around Maha flashed as he descended down, and then a blade appeared in his hand. His lips curved up into a sinister smile. Light wheel slash. Circular rays of the blade light spread out around Maha at a high speed and sliced through him like mad. The surrounding air became extremely chaotic. The saber emitted ear-piercing splitting sounds, which were similar to a disastrous flute playing. The circular rays of the blade light enveloped Maha in a radius of 1,000 feet. The area where he stood was a dead zone, not even the smallest of mosquitoes would be able to find a gap to escape. Meanwhile, Zen stood directly above Maha where the blade light was the most concentrated. However, Maha's attacks didn't faze him at all. When Maha brought out his saber, he already had the great weighty sword in his hand. Maha's saber was extremely nimble and agile like a small viper. It could attack its opponent numerous times from any angle, and its every move was fatal. On the other hand, Zen's great weighty sword was like a giant dragon hidden in an abyss. It was immensely heavy, but once it had launched an attack, it only needed a single strike to kill its opponent. Boom, 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 boom. Zen held the great weighty sword horizontally in front of his chest as the countless light wheels shot towards him. The clashing of the sword and saber should have created a melodious sound, but because of the great weighty sword's power, the weapons produced an extremely dull, metallic clang like a large bell. How can you block it that easily? Maha sneered. He turned the saber in his hand with a contemptuous look. Once again, the second wave of the light wheel slash struck at Zen. While Maha had suffered a loss while fighting Zen with brute force, he was highly confident in his speed. In addition, Maha and even the vast majority of martial artists thought that offense was the best defense. It wouldn't do any good to resist just like what Zen did, and besides, it wasn't hard for him to break through Zen's line of defenses. Maha continued to alter between his moves as the circular rays of the blade light moved in an increasingly strange direction. They drew an arc in the air when they slashed at Zen, avoiding his great weighty sword, and slashing towards his body. Maha smirked at the sight. In the next moment, the smirk on his face froze in place. Clank, clank, clank. Maha knew the power of the circular blade light that was created by the light wheel slash very well. Back then when he had practiced the light wheel slash, he had chopped the heavenly divine shield, one of the supreme divine weapons in the Murphy universe, into pieces. Zen was only dressed in a thin robe which seemed to have no defensive powers. Therefore, the light wheel slash should have cut straight into his body. What Maha never expected was that the dozen rays of circular blade light failed to even leave a mark on Zen's robe, let alone cut it into pieces. What was that thing made of? Not even Maha's knowledge and experience gave him any insight, as he was still a bit stunned. Such an incident was truly odd to witness. Well, I don't need to block. A small smile was plastered on Zen's face as he gently brandished the great weighty sword. He completely gave up on defense and kept his sword at his side. His eyes glinted ruthlessly and all his emotions left his body. Zen still hadn't struck out with his sword, but Maha's heart suddenly raced in shock. A foreboding feeling suddenly flashed in his mind like a lightning bolt. The feeling tugged at the depths of his heart and desperately urged him to flee. The Maha from before would face all kinds of danger without thought, and could always win over everyone in the end. After all, he was a godly genius and the most remarkable talent of the Murphy universe. He utilized all his resources well and always had many opportunities. He was always lucky. If Maha only had a 1% chance of defeating his opponent, then he still thought that he could beat them. This was because he was always able to receive fate's blessing. This time, however, he didn't dare defy his instincts. He actually had no chance of winning against Zen's sword strike. Of course, he was more than unwilling to accept this, but he didn't want to take the risk. He floated away in the air and went back to retreat. As for Zen, he stayed in the air above Maha, and as Maha continued to move back, he smashed directly into the ground. Boom! There was a muffled sound as a massive hole was formed on the ground. Maha slammed his body down on the hard soil, and then drilled into it. He continued to drill into the ground while Zen launched his sword strike. God's intimidating strike. Ever since Zen had become a world lord, he came to have a deeper understanding of the emotion-closing godly way. In order to enhance the God's intimidating strike's power back then, Zen had constantly imbued the laws into the sword intent. Now, it was no longer needed at this point. He slashed his sword downwards with all his might. Combined with the great weighty sword's own power, which was activated by the chaotic energy, it was safe to say that Zen's attack was tremendously deadly. In this whole universe at least, no one would be able to withstand such a strike. Just then, an invisible sword intent that contained an astonishing aura was dispersed down from the sky at an exceedingly high speed. The warriors in the distance just glanced at it, but quickly felt like their eyes had been pierced by needles. Splash! The long and narrow sword intent continued to scatter everywhere. As soon as it touched the ground, it penetrated the soil and created a huge crack. When viewed from above, the crack looked like a scar. Rumble! The sword intent continued to wreak havoc deep underground as the crack continued to extend. It didn't take too long before the Iron Moon City was split into two halves, but the crack continued to extend like there was no end. He hasn't been hit, Zen muttered coldly. As soon as Maha was beneath the ground, he dove towards the other side. He moved extraordinarily fast, as if he was a field mouse being chased by a cat in the barn. Then, an unmistakable ravine appeared. Again, Zen didn't think twice and immediately smashed towards Maha with his sword once more. God's intimidating strike. Hoo! Once again, Maha was able to dodge the sword intent ahead of time as he constantly changed the direction in which he was headed to escape. Again, hoo! At the same time, the fierce sword intent continued to rain down on him. Maha was very shocked, and felt that he was truly unlucky today. After Zen slashed out his first sword strike, Maha had already decided to avoid his opponent's attack first and then quickly find a chance to counterattack. According to his experience, Zen would always have a moment of weakness after he displayed this terrifying sword move. Thus, it would be the best time for him to strike back. Then again, ideas were always wonderful, but reality was always cruel. He never expected for Zen to repeatedly launch his attacks. Furthermore, each of his sword strikes was comparable to the all-out attack of a Supreme Lord. What was worse was that he had launched 3 sword attacks in a row without any rest or hesitation. He also did not gather any momentum. How did he make it? Most importantly, how big was his inner world? Generally speaking, a world lord's inner world was limited in size. No matter how much life vitality it had, it still wouldn't be enough for a large consumption. Even Maha's inner world wouldn't be able to last long if he had used such a skill. However, Zen had already slashed out 10 sword strikes in just a short period of time. If Maha tried to do that, he might have used up all the life vitality in his inner world. Yet there was Zen, who still looked so vigorous. He didn't look the least bit exhausted. Rumble! Huge amounts of sword intent continued to descend upon the ground. Several streams of the sword intent had even cut through the sunflower water world. They left numerous cracks all over the place, which made the supreme world they were in look like a face that was full of scratches. Soon enough, the entire supreme world had lost its stability and began to tremble continuously. The sacred supreme lords who hid in secret places saw the scene, and were speechless with shock. Chapter 1670, An Earthworm. Some of the sacred supreme lords were absolutely loyal to Maha. Some of them remained neutral, and some held great hostility toward Maha. After all, the internal forces of the sacred race were extremely complicated, they weren't as united as it seemed. But everyone still had absolute confidence in Maha. In the Murphy universe, Maha's reputation was simply too great. From the moment this fellow was born, he constantly created miracles. But as the sacred supreme lords saw his fight against Zen, their confidence in Maha suddenly began to waver. None of Zen's strikes contained any special laws or law of causality. The god's intimidating strike contained only Zen's comprehension of the godly way, it had displayed the peak level of sword intent. In terms of pure power of the god's intimidating strike, it was already comparable to that of Alina's profound holy thunder, equal to a supreme lord's full attack. But even a supreme lord couldn't recklessly unleash such a terrifying attack such as Zen's. He employed the god's intimidating strike with ease and it wasn't a problem for him to strike relentlessly. If he intended to do so, the several hundred strikes would be enough to shatter the very supreme world to pieces. This godly genius has exceeded our expectations, a supreme lord said, lowering his voice. The sacred race had long been prepared to invade the evolutionary universe. In their first year there, they made no move. Instead, they were busy collecting information from the evolutionary universe, analyzing the function of every single supreme lord's heavenly destiny, their true strength, the conflicts between the races, and so on, anything they could get their hands on. Even Murphy had warned the sacred race to pay special attention to these godly geniuses in the evolutionary universe. They managed to collect tons of detailed information regarding the 10 godly geniuses. This included their races, ages, strengths, personalities, experiences, godly ways, cultivation methods, and so on. But back then, none of the 10 had entered the divine refinement forbidden land. The sacred race had not compared the strength of the godly geniuses to that of Maha, and godly geniuses such as Zen and Nathan were only at the Soul Sea realm at that time. But after Zen and the other godly geniuses returned from the divine refinement forbidden land, their strengths had advanced by leaps and bounds. The sacred race had to have a new evaluation of these godly geniuses. Forcefully raising one's cultivation could cause one's level to destabilize. And these godly geniuses had just become world lords. Compared to Maha, they were still as young and tender as baby birds. In the hearts of these sacred supreme lords, they still weren't quite powerful enough to pose any real threat. But now, the strength Zen had displayed completely overturned their logic. His strength, it goes far beyond our imagination. Supreme Lord Barry's eyes were filled with shock. A feeling overcame him, telling him that it would be difficult for him to take the kid down. I've been to the divine refinement forbidden land before. It didn't seem all that magical. A sacred supreme lord shook his head in thought. Everyone's experiences are different. We have no way of knowing what happened to them. Right now, I'm worried that Maha might be defeated. In the end, the supreme lords were merely secondary creatures. The way they saw things and their knowledge were limited to the universes. Naturally, they didn't know the true secrets of the divine refinement forbidden land and couldn't figure out the treatment Zen and the others had received there. For instance, Zen himself had personally received guidance from the two holy beings, Holy Jay and Holy Drew. Roche, Nathan, and the other godly geniuses also received special treatments that wouldn't have come easy to ordinary cultivators. In the Deadwater world, the supreme lords of the evolutionary universe were giddy with excitement. Even Supreme Lord of Original Sin, who wore a gloomy face most of the time, had a look of admiration in his eyes. In the Deadwater world, he had seen Zen collect the corpse fragments of the Silver Moon Wolves. He was aware that Zen was doing so for Nathan's sake. He had even asked Supreme Lord Lester whether or not he could revive Nathan in such a case. But Supreme Lord Lester didn't have much confidence. In theory, so long as he could gather all the pieces of Nathan's flesh body, he could revive him completely. The heavenly destiny of revival was extremely powerful. Unless one's death was caused by the 5 aging processes, any other form of death could be dealt with so that the person could be revived. But the Silver Moon Wolves had already swallowed Nathan's corpse. If they had completely digested the corpse fragments, that would have made any chance of revival even slimmer. Still, Supreme Lord Lester's response gave Supreme Lord of Original Sin a glimmer of hope, lifting his spirits. But his hatred towards Maha didn't give in the slightest. Only because he feared the sacred Supreme Lords behind Maha did he forcefully suppress the urge to kill him. Now that he saw Zen display such powerful strength and completely suppress Maha, he was truly overjoyed. Master Feng, it seems like the information you've given us isn't wholly accurate. Is this boy truly weaker than a low-rank Supreme Lord? Supreme Lord Helam inquired with a smile. Because Zen gained the upper hand, the initially solemn atmosphere seemed to lighten and relax as the Supreme Lords grew more optimistic. Weaker than a low-rank Supreme Lord. Zen's current strength is probably enough to enable him to contend against a mid-rank Supreme Lord. At the very least, I have no confidence to defeat him. A Supreme Lord from the blessed Buddha land chimed in. That's not the case. In terms of overall strength, Zen is indeed formidable, but in the end, he does not have a heavenly destiny. Some of these destinies are unreasonable and extremely powerful, another Supreme Lord remarked. Indeed, the power of a Supreme Lords is not only reflected in our cultivation and knowledge. We rely most on the heavenly destinies, after all. All the Supreme Lords began arguing over Zen's strength. But the topic of this debate had changed from whether or not Zen could defeat Maha, to whether or not Zen had the ability to contend against Supreme Lords. But as they debated the matter, a blazing white light suddenly flashed from close by. Then, a space crack appeared before everyone's eyes. From the space crack stepped out Lavender, Supreme Lord Leroy, Supreme Lord Leia, and other Demon Knight Supreme Lords. While Lavender led the Demon Knight Supreme Lords to the Deadwater world, Zen had used the teleportation token to enter straight into the Sunflower Water world. Supreme Lord Matthias and the rest of the ogre race, along with everyone else, arrived ahead. The moment Lavender appeared, she gave Master Feng a light nod before greeting the many Supreme Lords. Meanwhile, the Celestial Position had also come to know of what happened in the Demon Knight. They informed the rest of the Supreme Lords, who then decided to forget about the Demon Knight race's attitude towards them before. The fact that they came to assist them gained their welcome and gratitude. Now, the different races of the evolutionary universe were united as they had mobilized all the forces available. After the Supreme Lords exchanged greetings with the Demon Knight Supreme Lords, they continued discussing their troublesome matters. When Lavender overheard the conversation, her pointed ears twitched, and a smile found its way to her face. Could Zen kill a Supreme Lord? Perhaps it was time to discuss how many of them Zen could kill. Previously, Zen had used the Death Chain to brutally beat Supreme Lord Shadow. If it weren't for Latonia, who had used the Link of Life on him, Supreme Lord Shadow would have been killed by Zen 10 times over. At the time, Zen still had difficulty completely taking the life of a Supreme Lord. But later on, when Mike appeared and took Zen away, the latter managed to master the enemy-repelling arts. Now, he possessed the ability to break causality, and his abilities had become even more terrifying. For instance, since a law of causality such as the 5 aging processes could be broken by Zen in a single slash, the crowns of destiny that these Supreme Lords had carried were nothing impressive next to such a feat. But of course, Zen hadn't yet fought a Supreme Lord since then, and Lavender couldn't jump to any conclusions. The Supreme Lords were debating this matter on their own, and she meant not to join them. So long as the Supreme Lords didn't perish, they'd eventually see Zen taking on a Supreme Lord. Meanwhile, in the battle, he slashed over 20 times. While the god's intimidating strike was famous for its great power, it wasn't particularly fast. Because Maha could travel fast underground, he managed to escape the attacks. But the World Tree in Zen's inner world had already taken root in other areas outside the inner world, relentlessly absorbing chaotic energy. It was inexhaustible and never could it be drained. So Zen launched such consecutive attacks to deter his opponent. Meanwhile, Maha could only groan and run around underground. After dashing several dozens of miles underground, Maha could no longer hold on. Suddenly, he stopped and the layer of earth in front of him began to crack open. Sword intent shot down before his eyes, piercing through the ground and creating a bottomless crack in front of him. Light shone through, and when Maha raised his head, he saw Zen, high up in the sky. For a moment, the two looked at each other. Zen, wielding the great weighty sword in his hand, smiled faintly. "Are you an earthworm?" Faced with such provocation, Maha's expression turned determined. The blade in his hand suddenly twisted until a deep purple light spread from it. Chapter 1671. Fight with Bare Hands. Iron Moon City was aglow with bright purple from the orb of light that had spread quickly across the land, covering the whole city up to the hills. Maha's skill was apparent, especially when the opponent was Nathan. He would often try to intimidate him using the Grand World technique, but even without it, Maha would have still been able to defeat Nathan. However, compared to Nathan, Facing Zen gave Maha a terrible headache. Whether in terms of strength or weaponry, Zen could easily defeat him. Maha's speed had proved to be superior to many, but when he was faced with Zen, escaping was its only function. The Grand World Technique was one of Maha's greatest assets. Once he activated it, he could dominate and make all the rules to his advantage. Nonetheless, after being defeated by Zen and fleeing in every direction, Maha had already lost face. Although Maha had already mentally prepared himself to fight Zen and wholly removed all arrogance in his heart to be in his best condition, this did not mean that Maha lacked pride. As the top godly genius of Murphy Universe, being chased all the way down here and running around underground with his face covered in dirt was not Maha's style. Besides, Zen continually swung his terrifying sword, and some human world lord had been continuously using the roaring token to exaggerate the situation. All creatures in the evolutionary universe and all of the sacred warriors were immediately informed of his escape. "I do look like an earthworm," Maha muttered, "but you will have to pay for saying that." Whoosh! At this moment, Maha gently stepped on the ground and shot out like an arrow leaving the bow. The saber in his right hand emitted a black light as he rushed towards Zen at breakneck speed. Zen did not feel anything out of the ordinary, even when totally enveloped by the light. There were 3,000 godly ways, it was impossible to understand the uniqueness of all of them. As he saw Maha rushing towards him, he didn't hesitate at all. His pair of heartless eyes flashed, and his fierce sword glowed with a majestic aura that once again cut down towards Maha. Huff! However, before Zen's sword could strike out, Maha raised his head and slashed with his saber. The strange thing was that Maha's blade wasn't aimed at Zen. Rather, it was pointed in the direction of Iron Moon City. It was confusing, for where he had swung his blade was, after all, far from where Zen was. The Iron Moon City was also in a state of disintegration. The human and sacred world lords were all circling in the air, observing the two battle from a distance where if they were even slightly caught up in it, their lives would be in danger. Yet it seemed none of them cared. Is Maha out of his mind? One world lord said, "It's better to dodge it. It's heading towards us." Another onlooker exclaimed, "What happened to you?" Another said, puzzled. The world lords noticed the sudden shift in the space around them. Several of their companions had hurriedly retreated and disappeared from the crowd. In the next instant, they appeared in another place. At the same time, the strike that Maha had made towards Iron Moon City also strangely appeared gearing towards Zen. The saber light flashed, and with a clang, this saber had actually skillfully countered Zen's sword. Maha's face revealed a sneer. Then, his saber continued to slash in the direction of Iron Moon City. With the Grand World Technique, the power of Maha's saber light became even more intense. That saber light shot straight towards Zen, attacking his vital points from every direction. Clank, clank, clank. Zen gently lifted his hand and once again used the great weighty sword to defend Maha's attacks, realizing that the space law in the surrounding area seemed to have been altered by Maha. Zen wasn't the only one who noticed this. The martial artists in Iron Moon City also noticed that with every movement 30 feet to the east, they would naturally travel to a height of 60 feet. Therefore, when Maha slashed towards the east, that slash just so happened to cut down on Zen, who was 60 feet above his head. This was the extraordinary capability of the Grand World Technique. It could change the rules as it wished. However, Maha's Grand World Technique was still incomplete in such a way that he could only change the rules to a certain degree. The true and complete Grand World Technique could change all the natural laws and create whatever rules the warrior wished for. In other words, the Grand World Technique's power seemed to be from an entire world of its own while being omnipotent in this world. During the constant clanging of their weapons, Zen saw through the changes Maha made. He then used one hand to protect his head as he fell down, head first. As Zen and Maha crossed paths, their eyes met and flashed at the same time. The two of them could see the confidence in each other's eyes, letting the other know that they were sure to win. Zen smiled slightly, and suddenly slashed with his great weighty sword. When the god's intimidating strike was released, Zen was already 30 feet below Maha, and his sword was also directed towards the east. Zen thought that if Maha could change the rules, he would simply adapt to it. As Maha saw Zen's actions, he coldly smiled and said, "Childish." According to the new rules of space created by Maha with his Grand World Technique, the laws that governed space and connections had changed. In this case, if a martial artist were to walk eastwards, they would appear 60 feet above the ground. Zen plummeted downwards, and his eastward strike would have been ultimately slashing towards Maha, who was above him now. Unfortunately, this rule was decided by Maha, Therefore, he was able to instantly change the rules to his liking. At this moment, when Zen struck, Maha once again had changed the rules. The course of Zen's strike was altered, and his slash went towards the west. In this instance, the attack had appeared behind Zen, and Zen's sword was slashing towards himself. In the face of his continuous attack apparently appearing behind himself, Zen's heart trembled as he did a somersault in the air, forcibly dodging his own sword intent. He could not help but frown. Maha, who was above him, revealed an apologetic expression. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "I'm genuinely sorry. I'm the ruler here." As his voice fell, Maha once again brandished the saber in his hand and rushed towards Zen. The saber was raised high in the air, and as the orbs of black light gathered on the blade edge, it began to produce terrifying kinetic energy. The bizarre clothes Zen was wearing seemed to be effective in protecting him, yet Maha didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to kill him. Just as Zen was about to swing his sword to block Maha's attack, he suddenly felt his body sink as he lost his balance and fell towards the ground. Furthermore, he was also unable to dodge Maha's slash. However, it wasn't just Zen, but all of the martial artists within the scope of Maha's grand world techniques simultaneously began to fall downwards. At this moment, Maha had changed the wind law. Under normal circumstances, a warrior could fly after they had reached the illuminating soul realm, and that ability relied on the wind law. Therefore, when an illuminating soul realm warrior practiced flying, the most important thing was to move with the wind. But at this moment, the wind law had been directly prohibited by Maha. Those within the range of the grand world technique would not be able to fly, even Maha himself. Knowing this would happen, Maha prepared himself beforehand. After pointing his sword, he adjusted his body, and used the power of his descent to increase the strength of his strike. As for Zen, who had suddenly lost his balance, facing Maha's saber was unavoidable. This ability is impressive. Zen was smiling as he fell. As Maha's saber slammed down at him, he suddenly waved the great weighty sword in his hand. Relying on the weight of the sword, he spun in the air without dodging and reached out to grab Maha's saber. Crack! PFF'd. For the first time, the black light contained within Maha's weapon made Zen bleed. It cut open Zen's palm, and golden blood flowed from the cut. Maha's blade remained impaled on Zen's palm, but it couldn't go any further. Maha thought, this fellow's physical body is. What was happening made him gape. He knew that the long robe on Zen's body had an extraordinary origin. It was thin as paper, yet it was impervious to any weapon. Nevertheless, he didn't expect that Zen's physical body would also be extraordinarily strong. He had used almost all of his strength to slash, but he couldn't even cut off one of Zen's hands. How could there be such a creature like Zen in the evolutionary universe? How was he supposed to defeat Zen? Chapter 1672, A Farce. In the eyes of Zen, the ability possessed by Maha to freely change the laws in this area was too powerful. If he used it properly, Zen would be unable to predict what the outcome might be. Since Maha had slashed his saber towards him, even though he might be injured, Zen was naturally unwilling to let the opportunity pass. He managed to grab the saber in his hand. Zen's body was already strong enough to astonish everyone who saw it. Even without using the power transfer skill, it was impossible to harm him by ordinary means. As he caught the saber in his hand, Zen pulled it quickly towards him. The vast strength within his body gushed out, and Maha, who was caught off guard, didn't have time to react. He even forgot to release the saber from his hand, and was therefore pulled like a lamb in Zen's direction. When he witnessed the terrifying strength within Zen's body, Maha knew immediately that it would not be possible for him to defeat Zen in close combat. As he was pulled towards Zen, his body began to slide like a mudfish, desperate to break free of Zen's grip. Maha used a very special movement technique. As his life vitality had gushed from his body, it had created a thin film that totally enveloped his body, making it impossible for others to capture him. He had already evaded Zen's attacks several times before, and expected to do the same on this occasion. However, the instant he made a move to escape, a ribbon of colorful light shot from Zen's hand and bound Maha's body to him. The death chain. Having seized his opportunity, Zen hesitated no longer as he linked himself with Maha. There was a reason Zen had hesitated to use the death chain. He was aware that although he could only see Maha, the Supreme Lords of the sacred race would certainly be hiding in the shadows. If the Supreme Lords chose to attack while he was bound to Maha, then there was no chance he would be able to escape. However, he finally decided that he must take risks to kill Maha. When Maha was bound by the death chain, he soon realized the nature of Zen's plan. If other warriors constantly encountered setbacks like Maha had, by now they would have panicked and lost their wits. They would no longer have possessed the will to fight. However, Maha still retained his absolutely calm demeanor and did not demonstrate the slightest panic. It only took a thought and Maha restored the wind law which he had banned earlier. His body spun and jumped into the air as he attempted to free himself from the death chain, but even if he erupted with all his strength, the death chain only wrapped him tighter and showed no signs of breaking. At the same time, he felt an irresistible force pulling him back. It was Zen who was pulling the death chain back to him. When Zen pulled Maha back, he punched out at the same moment. But, when Maha was just a few feet away from him, his figure strangely vanished. Maha was once again modifying the space law, and he quickly reappeared behind Zen. The space in front of Zen and the space behind him were connected by the power of space law, and the death chain appeared to be divided into two parts. Zen stepped forward. He wanted to dash into the space which was before him, but once he entered it, he found himself in the Iron Moon City. "What?" he exclaimed, his astonishment obvious. Confusion and helplessness could be read in Zen's eyes. By now, Maha had already modified the space law so much within the radius of the Grand World Technique that it was a complete mess. Countless invisible voids connected with each other, forming an invisible labyrinth. Although Maha was unable to break free from the death chain, Zen was equally stuck, being unable to get close to him. Sometimes Maha would appear right behind Zen, but then only a split second later, he would reappear somewhere else 10,000 feet away in the sky. As for Zen, even if he only moved half a step, he would slip into a void and instantly reappear in an unknown location. As a result, their fight developed into a stalemate. After Zen had traveled through space 10 times, he reappeared and found that he was only 10 feet away from his opponent. But in truth, the space between them wasn't as simple to cover as it looked. If Zen were to take a step forward, he knew that he would step into the void in front of him and once again reappear somewhere at a great distance from Maha. At this moment, Zen felt helpless. He stared at the satisfied smile on Maha's face and asked in a cold voice, "Is there anything else you can do apart dodging?" Maha's grin grew broader as he replied, "There are many ways to kill an opponent. I admit that you are a very powerful enemy. Your body is unbelievably strong and you have already surpassed the limits of a secondary creature. You are an extraordinary talent even in the divine land. Your physical strength is also quite astonishing." This was the first time that Maha had made such remarks to an enemy. Admittedly, Zen's great talent had truly astonished him. But he suddenly changed the topic and said, "There are many ways that warriors can choose to fight, but their final goal is always the same, and that is to kill the opponent. You only need to know that in the end I will win this battle." "What is the basis upon which you draw such a conclusion?" Zen asked. While Maha's strength was indeed extraordinary, it was still inferior to Zen's. With his current strength, Maha might be able to fight some low-rank Supreme Lords, but it was not easy for him to defeat them. As for Zen, even if he did not use the enemy-repelling arts, he was still able to kill a warrior at Supreme Lord Shadow's level. If he used the enemy-repelling arts, he could fight a mid-rank Supreme Lord or even a top-rank Supreme Lord. However, the way the Supreme Lords used their heavenly destinies could be very flexible. Even a top-rank Supreme Lord could not have absolute confidence in their ability to kill a low-rank Supreme Lord. The battles between warriors were always changing. Maha turned Zen with a smile and replied, "You've already been trapped by my skill. You will not be able to escape." Since his Grand World Technique could change the laws at his will, he was able to take advantage of it in a wide variety of ways. Now that Maha had totally modified the space law here, he was unable to leave by himself, as was Zen. This was because the Grand Teleportation Technique was forbidden in this area, and even Zen's teleportation token was rendered nullified. After all, the space law in the evolutionary universe was not applicable to this particular spot any longer. Theoretically, Zen was completely trapped here. "It is certainly amazing to possess such a powerful body," continued Maha. "But in the end, it will change nothing. You will still have to die here." As he finished speaking, Maha suddenly sat down with his legs crossed. His eyes began to take on a glassy appearance as he recited, "Eternity, happiness, self." At the same time, a very special aura began to emanate from his body. That aura was gentle and steady, and it looked as though he was attempting to summon something. Regrettably, before he was able to finish the chanting, Zen suddenly pulled the death chain to his side. Because of his great strength, Maha gave a stuffy cough as he was dragged by the chain and made to randomly fly around in the chaotic space. He suddenly closed in and then reappeared behind Zen. He then reappeared at a distant corner. But still, Zen could not pull Maha to his side. Maha had planned to use a special skill. He was now furious that he had been abruptly interrupted by Zen. He glared at Zen before sitting cross-legged in the air again. Eternity, happiness, self, clearness, reflection, killing, clarity. Noting that he had begun chanting again, Zen pulled the death chain once more. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Maha started to rapidly appear and then disappear in many different positions as if he was in a whack-a-mole game. His chanting had been once more interrupted by Zen. He glared angrily at Zen, but Zen maintained a poker face. As the Supreme Lords of both sides beheld this scene, they were all dumbfounded. While some of them even burst out laughing. This fight between the two godly geniuses had gradually turned into a farce because they were unable to do anything to each other. Maha plans to use the heavens suppressing object to defeat Zen, a Supreme Lord from Sacred Race said. He had already identified Maha's intentions. Another Supreme Lord frowned and said, the Grand Supreme Lord did indeed bestow this ability upon Maha before we came to this universe, but Maha could only use it once. It is very precious. Wouldn't it be too much of a waste to use it to kill Zen? Maha had prepared well before he led the Sacred Race in their invasion of the evolutionary universe. However, the heavens suppressing object had originally been intended to deal with the true God in the evolutionary universe. But now Maha had no alternative. He simply couldn't defeat Zen in any other way. It wouldn't be a waste to kill Zen, Supreme Lord Denzel said simply. His words were immediately received with approval by other Supreme Lords. Yes, you are right. It is almost impossible for such a great talent to appear in the evolutionary universe. He must be the last hope of Mike. No wonder Holy Murphy had specifically ordered us to first kill the godly geniuses in this universe. The Sacred Race had taken a great deal of effort to train Maha to this level. Even so, Maha couldn't have been as good as he was without the help of Murphy. However, Zen was far stronger than Maha in every respect. They speculated that training Zen must have taken much more effort. There was no reason for them to let Zen live. Chapter 1673, The Spinulose Wood Fern. Maha possessed a lot of backup plans. He retained the ability to protect himself even if he happened to come across a Supreme Lord within the evolutionary universe. However, killing Zen with these backup plans would not be easy. He knew that if he wasn't careful, he would die in Zen's hands. In challenging Zen, his intention was not to engage in a fair fight, but to take over the evolutionary universe. This was a war conducted between two holy beings under the established rules. Maha knew that he was just Murphy's pawn just as all living beings were merely the pawns of holy beings. For the moment, Maha no longer paid any attention to Zen. Instead, he closed his eyes and concentrated on his chanting. The heavens suppressing object possessed by every holy being was extraordinary. After one became a true god in the divine land, and created their own perfect inner world, their dependence on the life vitality would slowly decrease until it reached the point where they no longer consumed the life vitality at all. After all, consuming the life vitality was in a sense destroying the inner world. Warriors at the World Lord level would painstakingly build up their inner worlds and produce several divine kingdoms and sacred places. If they then fought with others and had to drain the life vitality from their cinnabar fields, all the divine kingdoms and sacred places would be destroyed, and all creatures would die. This could be an incredibly painful loss. After one became a true god, it was possible to condense a godly tile within the inner world before using the momentum within the inner world. What was called momentum was in reality a method of applying the faith energy at a higher level. For example, the creatures which inhabited the evolutionary universe were unaware that Mike existed, but that didn't stop Mike taking advantage of the momentum at will. A true god used a godly tile to control the momentum, while a holy being employed a heavens suppressing object for the same purpose. In both the evolutionary universe and the Murphy universe, the heavens suppressing object would become a heavenly destiny and seek out a representative of the holy being to become its owner. It was through this heavenly destiny that someone could borrow the momentum held within the universe. Master Feng possessed the evolution lotus flower and was able to borrow the momentum from within the evolutionary universe. In the Murphy universe it was Maha's father that the sacred race called the Grand Supreme Lord who could borrow the momentum. He held the Spinulose Wood Fern, the heaven-suppressing object within the Murphy universe. This Spinulose Wood Fern had a great origin. It had been born from a great ceremony before being controlled by Murphy. To keep Maha safe, the Grand Supreme Lord of the Sacred Race tore off a branch from the Spinulose Wood Fern before turning it into a spell and sending it into Maha's body. By activating it, Maha was able to use the momentum from the Murphy universe to kill his opponent. Of course, whether it was the Grand Supreme Lord, Master Feng, or Maha, none of the momentum they could borrow by using the heavens suppressing object could be compared to the momentum used by a holy being. The momentum was, after all, the power of a holy being, and they were only borrowing it. Despite this, the small amount of the momentum, which they controlled was still a force to be reckoned with. For now, Maha didn't pay the slightest attention to Zen. It didn't matter how hard Zen pulled on the other side of the chain, all that he was able to do was to make Maha continue to travel through the air. After activating the phantom teleport skill with the Grand World technique, he had made an invisible maze, and all the paths within this maze were isolated from Zen. The result of this was that no matter how Zen pulled on the chain, Maha would simply fly around Zen and could never approach him. Eternity, happiness, self, clearness, reflection, killing, clarity. As he chanted, Maha's heart became calm. He no longer felt affected by Zen's influence. A gentle aura began to spread out from his body as his chanting continued. It was not long before the shadow of a large tree appeared. This tree was so completely green in color that it appeared as if it had been adorned with jade. After appearing, it slowly rotated in the air, its broad leaves embedded with golden Sanskrit words. Golden Sanskrit. Upon seeing this spinulose wood fern, Zen's eyes were filled with shock, as a sense of impending danger almost overwhelmed him. The aura gave Zen the sense that he was facing a holy being. The image of the spinulose wood fern was becoming increasingly real, and the gentle aura grew stronger and stronger. At that moment, all of the sunflower water world was affected by the imposing aura from the tree. All of the martial artists, mortals, vicious beasts, and other creatures could feel the air around them become viscous. It was as if they were being submerged in water. I must admit that I'm quite jealous of you. Maha's smile grew even broader as he felt the increasingly thick aura. I never expected that there would ever be someone with greater talent than me among the secondary creatures. This is really not fair. The sacred race had spent a huge amount of resources cultivating Maha. His mother was the most outstanding supreme lord of the entire sacred race. She had even carried the child in her womb for more than 700 years. During all of that time, the Grand Supreme Lord of the sacred race had begun to pour an endless amount of resources into the still unborn Maha. There was no one in the Murphy universe who had ever been treated in this way. Murphy's interest had been aroused because the Grand Supreme Lord had been so intent on fostering Maha. Perhaps Murphy wanted Maha to be his disciple in the future. He had certainly thought highly of Maha's talent and had given him a lot of support behind the scenes. How helpless and puzzled must Maha have been feeling to find that such a richly endowed person as himself was actually being outclassed by Zen. What Maha did not know was that although Zen had indeed been born within the evolutionary universe, he was not a secondary creature, strictly speaking. His father was the owner of the evolutionary universe, and his mother also came from the divine land. Her status was extraordinary, and she had given birth to Zen and Yan because of a fortuitous encounter. When a peerless genius encountered a genius who was even more monstrous than him, he normally only had two options. The first option was to surpass the other. However, Maha had already strained the limits for a secondary creature. Perhaps in the inner worlds of many holy beings within the divine land, it would be difficult to find someone as talented as Maha, and no one was able to surpass Zen. The other option open to him was to eliminate the opponent. This meant that he would have to kill this genius. Now, Maha planned to use the momentum of the Murphy universe to kill Zen. I hate things that are unfair, so how about you going to perdition now? Maha smiled a cold smile and lightly pointed in Zen's direction. The spinulose wood fern that had appeared out of nowhere began to slowly rotate. Whoosh! The sticky aura spread out like a flowing tide in all directions. At this moment, the sunflower water world was not the only world affected. The dead water world to the north of the sunflower water world, the clear sky world in the south, and the yellow dragon world to the west of the sunflower water world all felt the effects of the aura. Kill him, father, Maha said indifferently. In theory, it should have been impossible for Maha to control the heavens-suppressing object. He could do no more than summon the spinulose wood fern. The only one with the power to control this heavenly destiny was his father, the sacred race's Grand Supreme Lord in the Murphy universe. Buzz! Without warning, the spinulose wood fern shook. The giant tree started to sway and golden beams of light were emitted from its trunk. Use glass as the ground. The sacred tree is solemn. Use gold as a rope. To make 8 boundaries, Maha chanted. This spinulose wood fern was the chief of all the trees in the land of bliss. And at this moment, this tree was rushing straight towards Zen with a loud bang. Faced with such power that was entirely beyond his comprehension, Zen was unable to determine a good way to fight it. All he could do was to rely on the power of the 9 divine stars. The 9 stars within his body began to spin intensely. The chaotic sea surged, and the central continent quaked uncontrollably. Zen's world wasn't large enough. Activating the 9 divine stars too much would cause the inner world to undergo a drastic change. At this point, Zen was out of ideas, and he didn't have a good solution to the problem, so he didn't have the time to pay attention to the myriad of living creatures in the inner world any longer. All of this time, the sacred race's supreme lords remained standing there, unmoving. However, within the dead water world, the other supreme lords in the evolutionary universe had started to panic. Master Feng, shouldn't we take action at this point? Supreme Lord of Thunder Punishment asked, his voice full of concern. With Nathan dead, no matter how, we must not allow Zen to be killed. Supreme Lord of Oracle also said. Supreme Lord Leroy, take me over there. Lavender had her brows knit together. Her actual cultivation was only at the level of a Grand World Lord, so she was not able to teleport continuously through multiple Supreme Worlds in the way which a Supreme Lord could. Right now, she felt the power of the strange tree and understood that Zen might be unable to withstand the coming blow. Maha was able to use the Heavens Suppressing Object, and Master Feng was also able to use the Heavens Suppressing Object. But at this time, Master Feng still quelled all of the Supreme Lord's restlessness. He simply stared at Zen from a distance, before saying resolutely, "Now is not the right time." Chapter 1674, Expansion. Now that the Celestial Positions plans had been set, every Supreme Lord present would have a chance to exhibit their actual strengths. Nathan was already dead. If Zen also died, the momentum of the evolutionary universe would only get weaker. It was something that the head of the Celestial Position race, Master Feng, had clearly felt. It was known that Maha had only used a small portion of the Murphy universe's momentum to activate the Spinulose Wood Fern. While it was no doubt impressive, Master Feng had actually thought of using the Evolution Lotus Flower to swallow it by force. However, he refrained from doing so. It wasn't that he didn't care about Zen's life. In fact, Master Feng knew very well that besides Win, Zen was the most important. It was because Zen's mission wasn't just in the universe alone. His future was in the Divine Land. Furthermore, the evolutionary universe could only survive after Zen had resolved Mike's contradiction. The only thing was that the evolutionary universe had to successfully resist the sacred race's attacks. If Master Feng had made a move now, the sacred race would definitely counterattack. It was certainly not a wise decision to start a battle too quickly. The supreme lords of the sacred race weren't the only ones keeping watch on the war. Their race's true god lurked around as well. However, it was Win who needed to deal with them. But if he hadn't even taken action up until now, then Master Feng definitely wouldn't be reckless either. The inky black sky glittered with twinkling stars. One dim star among them rotated slowly. At the bottom of the dim star sat Win. His eyes drifted towards Zen, who was hundreds of millions of miles away from him. I didn't expect that the sacred race would use the Heavens Suppressing Object on their first attack, Win said with a shake of his head, a trace of helplessness reflected in his eyes. He couldn't help Zen at this point. Therefore, Zen had to face Maha and the Heavens Suppressing Object on his own. I hope Zen could win and survive with his own strength. Win mumbled. Meanwhile, Zen stood with a troubled look on his face. He felt a great pressure weigh him down as the Spinulose Wood Fern suddenly pressed itself hard against him. This pressure was far beyond his imagination. In the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land, Zen had seen and felt the auras of both Holy Jay and Holy Drew. Their auras weren't unique to holy beings alone. A warrior who had become a true god could have it as well. It was the indistinct momentum that came from one's inner world. However, the momentum of the inner world was also divided into different levels. Win's own momentum was far inferior to that of a holy being. It would be difficult for Zen to sense it unless he released it on purpose. That was why Zen hadn't felt anything before when he and Win had met for the first time. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Soon enough, Zen's bones began to constrict because of the immense pressure. His bones rubbed against each other and produced strange sounds, and even his height had decreased by 2 inches. It wasn't long before Zen was groaning in unfathomable pain. At the same time, Maha had changed the space law of the place once again. The smirk on his face grew broader and broader as he watched Zen, who writhed in pain from his crushing bones. It really is an indestructible physical body. If only I could obtain the same. Maha exclaimed. He then decided that after the Spinulose Wood Fern had killed Zen, he would take Zen's corpse and study it thoroughly. He believed that he would unlock secrets behind Zen's physical vessel. On the other hand, Zen had sensed that his physical body had reached its limit. Numerous thoughts raced in his mind before he finally screamed, "Redemption armor." The redemption armor could change its shape according to the wearer's will. At that moment, Zen's long robe rapidly changed its shape. It extended from his chest and wrapped around his head, while its cuffs and lower hem elongated as well. Its texture began to change too. Its previously cloth-like material was now extremely hard and protected Zen in a thin, eggshell-like membrane. According to Holy Drew, this piece of redemption armor made from the source of godly tile was theoretically indestructible. After Zen had been completely covered by the armor, he suddenly felt the pain from the Spinulose wood fern suppression had been reduced by half. He felt his body relax, but before that, his stomach tightened. It turned out that the Spinulose wood fern's killing power had poured to his belly and into his inner world. Boom! An immense unstoppable force rained down the skies of his inner world and smashed everything in the central continent. The entire continent was like a mere piece of paper against the strong pounding of the Spinulose wood fern's killing power. The continent split into pieces, and fragments of it were scattered all over the chaotic sea. 1,000,000 creatures in his inner world died in a blink of an eye. The divine kingdoms and sacred places had been affected as well. Some of the more powerful martial artists scrambled in panic when they saw the deceptively weak force that came from the sky. The overwhelming power of the Spinulose wood fern was out to destroy Zen's inner world. This power, Zen muttered with a frown. He sent streams of seawater into the air, which he turned into chaotic energy, and then he aimed it towards the incoming killing force. Seemingly endless waves of the brown chaotic energy circled continuously around the killing power. Devour. While Zen was an omniscient existence within his inner world, he could only neutralize the power that invaded it. He couldn't actually resist it at all. He gave the chaotic energy the power to devour, and thus, it now converted the killing force into chaotic energy. Rumble, rumble, rumble. However, the killing force was too strong. Even if Zen controlled the chaotic energy and continuously devoured and converted the killing force, he still wouldn't be able to stop it from destroying his inner world. It wasn't long before his belly was an angry red color from the intense pain. His inner world began to show signs of collapse as his face twisted in agony. "You can still hold on. I've underestimated you before. The robe you wear seems great. Give up. You won't be able to resist this killing power." Maha could clearly see Zen's changing and conflicting expressions. He understood that Zen's formidable strength had been exhausted and there was no doubt that he would die this time. The Spinulose wood fern shook violently again in the air as the light on top of it glowed even brighter. Another wave of its strong killing power rushed towards Zen. It directly passed through his redemption armor and drilled into his belly. Zen drew out more and more chaotic energy, but he couldn't convert the killing power at all. After the killing power had been condensed in the center of his inner world, it began to expand in all directions. It was about to shatter his whole inner world. Generally speaking, a normal world lord's inner world was still quite fragile. Then again, if it had been another warrior, the inner world would have been gone by now. The boundary wall of Zen's inner world was formed from 1,080 golden Sanskrit words which were connected together. It was an extremely stable wall. Yet as the killing power continued to condense, it expanded even further. It wouldn't take long before the boundary wall would become unstable. At the same time, the 1,080 Sanskrit words began to vibrate non-stop. This is bad. Zen's heart beat erratically in his chest when he felt the changes in his inner world. With the help of the redemption armor, his physical body could still withstand the killing force. However, it seemed like his inner world couldn't hold on any longer. Suddenly, the golden Sanskrit words in his inner world glowed brightly. Buzz. The Sanskrit words began to rotate rapidly. Each golden Sanskrit word began to split into 2 golden Sanskrit words, then the 2 became 4, and the 4 became 8. Finally, each of them was divided into many, and then the words started to fly away from the boundary wall. Having lost the support of the golden Sanskrit words, the inner world was now extremely fragile. Crack, crack, crack. Soon enough, the boundary wall crashed like an eggshell that was under a heavy rock. All the color from Zen's face was drained due to the intense pain he felt. Yet, the pain was nothing and he could bear it. However, the most important body part to a martial artist was the belly. To destroy the inner world meant to break the belly, and in turn Zen would be crippled. Just then, a strangely astonishing scene unraveled within Zen's inner world that had left him dumbfounded. The golden Sanskrit words that flew everywhere had been connected once again. Moreover, the number of golden Sanskrit words was now multiplied by 10. There were about 10,800 golden Sanskrit words in total. The moment all of them were connected, a faint layer of light appeared and behind it was a new boundary wall. Apparently, Zen's inner world had suddenly expanded tenfold. Chapter 1675. The branch was broken. Back then on the path of heavens, Zen's father had given him several methods to expand his inner world. There were several ways to do so. One of them was to incorporate more life vitality into the body, and then gradually expand the entirety of the inner world. Most people adopted this specific method as it was the most reliable. However, this method also resulted in the slowest speed of expansion. While others needed to include the life vitality to execute this method, Zen needed to incorporate chaotic energy. During this period of time, he had tried to increase the speed at which the world tree absorbed the chaotic energy to expand his inner world. To his disappointment, however, the effects weren't as apparent as he had expected. Another method to expand one's inner world was to use brute force. Although the inner world might end up weak if one used this method to break it and rebuild it, the foreign force that would be channeled to the inner world could break through the inner world's boundaries in a short period of time. Thus, the desired effect of expansion would be achieved. However, there were devastating consequences for the lives that resided in the inner world. Therefore, a person who chose this method should make the necessary preparations before taking their plan into action. Now, Zen had currently used the second method. The difference was that Zen did not draw the Spinulose Wood Fern's power to his inner world himself, and the power was too overwhelming. At that moment, Zen felt as if his inner world was about to collapse from the power. Yet, his inner world had expanded tenfold and had managed to stabilize itself, preventing its collapse. After the 10,800 Sanskrit words had stabilized, they quickly released beams of golden light which then crossed Zen's inner world. They converged continuously to the center until they had gradually formed a golden pillar of light. Whoosh! At that point, the golden pillar of light soared into the sky and merged with the killing power. The pillar of light crashed against the killing power and in the end, had extinguished the killing power. It continued to expand in the air until it had quickly reached the height of the 9 stars, past the height of the godly plate, and shot itself directly towards the inner world's peak. A slight heat warmed Zen's elixir field, then he felt a scorching hot sensation. A beam of light the size of a thumb immediately hit the Spinulose Wood Fern. Pa! The golden light beam was instantly submerged into the Spinulose Wood Fern, which subsequently stopped spinning. Then, it quietly floated in the air without making any movements. Not too far away stood an astonished Maha, who couldn't understand what had just happened. Just what was that golden light that came out from Zen's elixir field? Why had he lost his connection with the Spinulose Wood Fern? And most importantly, why was Zen still safe and sound? After a short while, a cracking sound was heard. Crack! The surfaces of the verdant and glistening Spinulose Wood Fern began to crack. Crack, crack, crack. The cracks continued to spread throughout the Spinulose Wood Fern, until they covered the entire surface area. Then, the Spinulose Wood Fern suddenly collapsed in front of Maha and Zen. Right after, the momentum that had affected many great supreme worlds was completely gone. At the same time the Spinulose Wood Fern collapsed, the heavens in the Murphy universe began to shake violently. All the supreme lords who were presently in it felt the tremors. In the Murphy universe, the most magnificent Holy Spirit palace of the sacred race was empty, except for the presence of a middle-aged man with hair that hung down to his shoulders. It could be said that his appearance was 70% similar to Maha's. After all, he was Maha's father, the Grand Supreme Lord of the sacred race. Behind him was a huge Spinulose Wood Fern. This colossal Spinulose Wood Fern was the real body of the heavens suppressing object, and what Maha had used was simply one of its branches. Crack! A crisp sound reverberated throughout the hall, and one branch of the Spinulose Wood Fern suddenly broke off. It fell down to the floor and was shattered into numerous emerald green granules that scattered everywhere. The Grand Supreme Lord couldn't help the shiver that ran down his spine. This heaven-suppressing object didn't belong to him, but rather to Murphy. In theory, it was almost impossible to destroy a heaven-suppressing object, or at least not in any universe. That was why the Grand Supreme Lord gave one of the Spinulose Wood Fern's branches to Maha. The branch could be considered as Maha's talisman and his trump card. The branch could summon the Spinulose Wood Fern to use the momentum of the Murphy universe to kill anyone at all. After it was used, the branch would return to the Spinulose Wood Fern. However, the branch did not return and instead, was broken into pieces. What used to be the perfect Spinulose Wood Fern was no more, as it was missing one of its branches. This heaven-suppressing object was extremely important to Murphy, but it had gotten broken in the hands of the Grand Supreme Lord. How could he explain this to Murphy? Just what kind of existence is in the evolutionary universe? It can directly shatter a heaven-suppressing object. Oh, my Maha, the Grand Supreme Lord lamented. If that was truly the case, then Maha's life was also in danger. Meanwhile, Maha stood completely stunned on the spot. His mind was a mess and he couldn't comprehend what had happened before him. Why didn't this Spinulose wood fern kill Zen? In fact, Zen had broken it. It was Murphy who had bestowed this heaven-suppressing object upon his father. If it was damaged, then Murphy might punish his father. Just as his mind had gone blank, a strong force suddenly pulled him forward. By the time he had gotten to react, his face was greeted by Zen's fist. Bam! How much power did his punch have? It was imprinted onto his face without any obstruction. Buzz! The treasure on Maha's body automatically moved to protect its master just as Zen's fist collided with Maha's body. An armor surrounded him and blocked Zen's strength. If it wasn't for the armor, Maha could have died. It was a top-grade defensive treasure from the Murphy universe, the red armor of Heaven's gift. Huh, Zen exclaimed. He clearly did not expect Maha to have such a protective treasure. He sneered and threw another punch towards Maha without a second thought. Bam, 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 every time a punch hit Maha, blood-red scales would appear around his body like armor. The armor could offset most of the power in Zen's fist. It could be said that this armor was an extraordinary treasure. At that moment, Zen's fist gradually became faster. After dozens of punches, he had finally broken through Maha's defenses. Crack! Maha's body emitted a shattering sound. Red light glowed around him, then all of the red scales began to disintegrate. Zen had now shattered the red armor of Heaven's gift as well. Again, Zen punched once more and this time, he wanted to kill Maha straight. A couple more punches and Zen had thoroughly smashed Maha. How could the latter even have the strength to fight back? He was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered by now. He had lost almost all of his will to fight. No, a female's voice rang throughout the area. A graceful silhouette floated towards Zen. It was Connie, who had been silently watching the battle from afar. The moment she saw that Zen was about to kill Maha, she disregarded everything and wanted to stop Zen. Thus, she used the grand teleportation to block Zen. Idiot off! Zen roared. Maha had various strange methods to protect himself. Therefore, Zen would never let go of this opportunity to kill him. Moreover, he would never pity a woman from another race. Bam! Zen's fist landed on Connie. How would her body withstand his heavy punch? There was a loud, mournful cry, and a figure limply fell down like a piece of cotton. The power of Zen's punch was enough to kill Connie. Stop! At the same time, a blood-red space crack exploded around Maha, from which a majestic aura poured out. It was Supreme Lord Barry, who had used the grand teleportation as well to appear beside Maha and protect him. Supreme Lord Barry worked for Maha and would do anything the latter told him to do. Therefore, he couldn't just sit and watch Maha get killed in front of him. When Supreme Lord Barry appeared, he immediately activated his heavenly destiny. Just then, a sizzling sound was heard. The moment Supreme Lord Barry had appeared, his whole body was pitch black, but it glimmered under the light. This was the heavenly destiny he carried, the highly toxic body. The highly toxic body was able to unleash a strong power in a short period of time, which allowed him to be immortal. Furthermore, his strength and the toughness of his body were both increased by several dozen times. In this way, an ordinary Supreme Lord would not be able to do anything to him. He didn't think Zen could deal with him. After all, Zen was a mere world lord. I said idiot off. Zen was already anxious to kill Maha, and punch the Supreme Lord who had appeared square in the gut. Puff! His supposedly tremendously powerful punch seemed to have turned into a pillow of feathers. It actually failed to harm or damage Supreme Lord Barry. Ha ha ha! Supreme Lord Barry's lips stretched into a complacent smile. He knew that Zen wouldn't be able to hurt him. But just as he was laughing out loud, he saw Zen lift up the great weighty sword in his hand. A layer of misty light flickered endlessly on the great weighty sword as he swung it towards Supreme Lord Barry. Chapter 1676, Kill Supreme Lords in a Row. Zen's sword only slashed at air before Supreme Lord Barry. The great weighty sword did not make direct contact, but the causality-breaking light entered Supreme Lord Barry's body. The latter paid no mind to Zen's attack at all. When he activated the immortal highly toxic body, even a mid-rank or a top-rank Supreme Lord would find it difficult to kill him. All they could do was continuously expel him, such was to say that the current Supreme Lord Barry was practically invincible. But as the cyan light on Zen's great weighty sword flashed by, something unexpected happened. Supreme Lord Barry's highly toxic body instantly faded from the surface of his body and the black layer disappeared without a trace. His body then returned to its original form. Supreme Lord Barry was also stunned. In actuality, he didn't do anything and only blankly looked at Zen, at a loss as to what to do. Go to perdition. Zen's first sword strike had severed Barry's heavenly destiny while his second strike directly landed on Barry's head. Under the great weighty sword's heavy pressure, Barry's head was sliced into pieces before his headless corpse fell towards the ground. And so, Zen killed the first Supreme Lord of the sacred race. I can't believe my eyes. Zen killed a Supreme Lord of the sacred race in a single strike. What's with that cyan light? Within the Deadwater world, the many Supreme Lords from the evolutionary universe were no longer able to hold themselves back. According to Master Feng, if the Supreme Lords of the sacred race chose to act at this time, they would provide assistance immediately. But Master Feng gave no reaction, he merely stared at Zen in the sunflower water world, his eyes revealing an indescribable expression. In the blink of an eye, Zen had killed a Supreme Lord of the sacred race, stunning all the rest. No one could understand what technique he had just used. Zen's eyes were as calm as ever. As he looked at Maha, an idea suddenly came to him. He wasn't in a hurry to kill this godly genius but rather to use the great weighty sword to strike Maha's forehead. A massive power poured into his head, severely injuring Maha's soul, putting him into a coma. Whoosh, whoosh. Immediately afterward, another blood-red space crack appeared not too far away. As soon as the figure in the crack was revealed, Zen pulled Maha forward, the great weighty sword in his hand swinging out once more. 2 slashes. With the first sword attack, Zen cut off the heavenly destiny of the Supreme Lord using the causality-breaking light. The second sword strike was filled with boundless power. With the power of the great weighty sword, it crushed the Supreme Lord heavily. It was quite a pity that before Supreme Lord Noel could even say anything, he was already smashed to smithereens. Even as he died, he would never be able to rest in peace. Then, Zen killed the second Supreme Lord. Just as Zen beheaded Supreme Lord Noel, the third Supreme Lord of the sacred race also used grand teleportation and crawled out from another bloody red space crack. And Zen did just the same without any hesitation. His first sword strike cut off the Supreme Lord's heavenly destiny and the second strike killed him. It would seem that in Zen's hands, these Supreme Lords were no different from ordinary world lords. With his strength, how easy it was for him to kill an ordinary world lord. In less than 12 seconds, 3 Supreme Lords had fallen to death in Zen's hands. These Supreme Lords of the sacred race had died unjustly. As they were working for Maha, it was natural for them to protect him. Zen was indeed very powerful in their eyes. But there was still a large gap between him and a Supreme Lord. In their eyes, just Supreme Lord Barry alone was enough to withstand Zen's attack. The other two could work together and take Zen down. The second and third Supreme Lords failed to notice Zen's movements in the sunflower water world, nor did they know that Zen had already killed Supreme Lord Barry. They had only closely followed Barry's grand teleportation, so before they could even react, Zen slaughtered them in succession. Originally, another 2 Supreme Lords had wanted to use grand teleportation to get there. But they had slowed down a touch to catch a glimpse of the inconceivable scene in the sunflower water world. All the while, all the Supreme Lords of the sacred race could feel their bodies stiffen. Rumble. The vibrations of the heavens were transmitted through their heavenly destinies. Just how intense were the tremors caused by the deaths of 3 Supreme Lords? At the time, there were only around 50 Supreme Lords of the sacred race that had attacked the evolutionary universe. But there were still nearly 100 Supreme Lords that were on standby in the Murphy universe. These Supreme Lords all felt the heavens tremble simultaneously. Our Supreme Lords have been killed. 3 Supreme Lords of our race were killed in a row. Was it the decisive battle between our race and the humankind? I don't think so. The Grand Supreme Lord has no intention of attacking yet. After the sacred race attacked the evolutionary universe, everything had gone smoothly. They hadn't considered any serious obstacles and not a single Supreme Lord had been killed. But in comparison, a few Supreme Lords of the evolutionary universe had already lost their lives. The difference in the strength of both sides became clear. At this moment, 3 Supreme Lords of the sacred race were gone. It brought great shock and suspicion to the sacred race, and they were itching to know just how these Supreme Lords had died. With one hand, Zen held onto Maha's neck and lifted him, unconscious, into the air. His other hand held the great weighty sword as he pointed it towards the depths of the sunflower water world. The causality-breaking light slowly revolved around the sword and its clear and misty light was rather pleasing to the eyes. Yet to the Supreme Lords of the sacred race, it was like the light emitted by the Grim Reaper. It was a silent provocation. In the sunflower water world, only the sound of the wind could be heard. The world lords of the sacred race hid within the broken Iron Moon City, not uttering a single word, letting disbelief overtake them. The human world lords and those of the other races of the evolutionary universe could feel their hearts fill with excitement and joy. Zen managed to kill 3 supreme lords in an instant. His strong performance was extremely encouraging. Good news. Zen killed 3 supreme lords of the sacred race in a row. Haha. A bold ogre world lord activated a roaring token, allowing his voice to resound throughout the universe. When the countless living creatures in the evolutionary universe heard the news, they were all in complete disbelief. Wasn't Zen fighting Maha? How come I haven't heard the news of him killing Maha? He killed 3 supreme lords instead. Just how strong is a supreme lord? I've never seen one in my life. 3 supreme lords. A supreme lord is the strongest existence in the universe. Zen has such strength. Most of the mortals couldn't understand what sort of existence a supreme lord really was. Even world lords, soul sea realm warriors, spirit supreme realm warriors, and spirit transformation realm warriors were rather vague concepts in their minds, and they couldn't carefully distinguish the difference in their strength. But all they needed to know was that Zen had killed 3 supreme lords. When the Ogre World Lord's voice was transmitted throughout the entire universe, Master Feng felt the evolution lotus flower in his hand suddenly sink. The momentum in the evolutionary universe had increased twofold. The momentum of the universe was constantly changing. After the invasion of the sacred race 3 years ago, the momentum of the evolutionary universe continued to weaken. Before Nathan was killed, it had weakened to a fifth of its original state. Because of Nathan's death, it suddenly rose to the same level as it had been before the invasion of the sacred race. Now it even rose to the peak. Such meant that all the living creatures within the evolutionary universe were quite optimistic about Zen. Now, the supreme lords of the sacred race no longer dared to act so rashly. Before Zen, their lives could be harvested in an instant, it seemed. It wasn't that they lacked any way to deal with him. Zen had ambushed the 3 supreme lords when he killed them, after all. If the supreme lords managed to keep a certain distance from Zen, they could stay safe. But the strange method Zen had used was intimidating, to say the least. Isn't this Maha your godly genius? Not a single supreme lord of the sacred race dares to take him away. As Zen said it, a relaxed smile remained on his face. He used the roaring token to utter the words. But he gained no reply from the supreme lords. If that's the case, I won't show him any mercy. Then, a fierce light flashed in Zen's eyes as he tossed the unconscious Maha away like he weighed nothing. The great weighty sword slashed at him while his body had lost any form of protection. Under the impact of such fierce power, Zen's sword sliced him into pieces. Chapter 1677, Counterattack. Hiding in the shadows were the supreme lords of the sacred race, also feeling extremely conflicted in their hearts. Because Maha had always been considered the leader of their sacred race's expedition team, all their decisions and strategies were left to him. He had challenged the geniuses in the sunflower water world to suppress the momentum of the evolutionary universe. Now, not only was he unable to suppress the momentum, he had even lost his life in the battle. The sacred race had made sufficient preparations before Maha set off. Even if he died there, he would still be brought back to life. His father, the Grand Supreme Lord, had prepared another precious body for him. But to the entire sacred race, it was an unprecedented setback. Because of this, the sacred race's previous plan had been disrupted completely. Even the wise Supreme Lords didn't know what to do next. Zen must die, Supreme Lord Denzel said seriously. Amongst all the Supreme Lords of the sacred race present, only Supreme Lord Denzel was a top-ranked Supreme Lord. Now that Maha had been killed, he was the only one left with the right to speak up. Supreme Lord Denzel and Maha never had a very good relationship. But the matter of their godly genius being killed was no small matter. It was impossible for them to allow Zen to leave just like that. But should we make a move now? Another Supreme Lord seemed hesitant. The fact that Zen had killed 3 Supreme Lords in the blink of an eye gave them quite a shock. It was natural that these Supreme Lords felt a sense of fear and cowardice. None of them wanted to be Zen's 4th kill. Humph, don't forget our goal. We originally wanted to force the Supreme Lords of the evolutionary universe to fight with us. Now that Maha is dead and Zen is still in the sunflower water world, we'll deal with Zen there. Do those cowards dare to make a move now? Supreme Lord Denzel said with a sneer. Zen's methods may be strange, but in the end, he's still just a world lord. I saw that he killed Barry and the rest by relying solely on that strange cyan light on his sword. All we need to do is avoid it. But none of you even have a little courage. I feel quite bad for Holy Murphy for having bestowed the heavenly destinies upon you cowards. Supreme Lord Denzel made his thoughts quite clear. Although Maha's death was a major setback, it hadn't actually been a major blow to the sacred race. At most, it increased the momentum within the evolutionary universe. At this moment, if a decisive battle broke out, the sacred race's reinforcements would arrive soon. Such wasn't what the Supreme Lords of the evolutionary universe hoped to see. The sacred race had so many Supreme Lords. Were they really afraid of Zen? All of the Supreme Lords of the sacred race nodded in agreement. Supreme Lord Denzel's words were reasonable, after all. I'll disrupt the space law of the sunflower water world. You guys must prepare to deal with Zen, said Supreme Lord Denzel. At this moment, he spread his arms wide and a huge altar appeared behind him, the altar of the sacred race. The heavenly destiny he used was created by Murphy himself, a spatial ability that he gained from studying the real sacred race. But just as the Supreme Lords of the sacred race made their move, the Supreme Lords in the evolutionary universe also began moving. The celestial position race, as well as the other forces in the evolutionary universe, had been patient with the sacred race all the while. They were waiting for a good opportunity. Being patient was a rather painful process, no one could deny. For example, the Humanity Alliance had been slowly taken over and Nathan had been killed, his corpse fed to the wolves. These Supreme Lords were the strongest powerhouses in the evolutionary universe, the highest overlords. Although they were all proud and arrogant, they had managed to endure until now. But at this moment, Master Feng finally received Win's order. Prepare to make a move after 150 seconds. Standing on a dark star was Win, hidden in the deep space. After issuing this order, he stomped his foot heavily on the star. Boom! The motion contained strong momentum. Such was the momentum Win had. Although the scale of this inner world was far from that of a holy being's and he himself didn't possess any heaven-suppressing object, the momentum he exuded was still extremely terrifying. Whoosh! The dark star under his feet dragged out a dim ray of light as it rapidly descended. It descended toward the supreme world in which the spring race once lived. A few years back, the sacred race had opened up this universe's sighing wall and invaded the evolutionary universe. Afterward, the sacred race's warriors occupied the spring race's 3 supreme worlds, using them as a springboard to take over the land of the Humanity Alliance. The dark star was descending unbelievably fast. All the creatures in many supreme worlds saw a faint ray of light shooting towards the southernmost part of the universe as the star rapidly fell. There weren't many dark stars in the evolutionary universe. At the beginning of each grand era, a new sun would appear. But a sun had a lifespan of only 700 million years or so. When the sun's light was completely released, the huge fireball continuously collapsed towards the center, condensing and shrinking to a millionth of its original size. So the mass of a dark star was extremely terrifying, even more so than the star essence iron. Win had also expended much effort to move this dark star. The sighing wall of the universe was extremely sturdy. Even with Murphy's support, the sacred race still had to expend a great amount of energy just to break through a 200-foot hole in the sighing wall. Surrounding this hole were numerous buildings constructed by the sacred race. The defensive enchanted barriers alone went up to 60 layers. Such was the only path for the sacred race to invade the evolutionary universe, after all. If this path was sealed off, it would trouble the sacred race greatly. Outside the hole was a massive squad. It had over 100 world lords, including a supreme lord of the sacred race that guarded it at all times. What is that? One of the world lords of the sacred race was on patrol and raised his head to look at the sky. Within his line of sight, a black dot appeared, growing larger and larger. Alas, now that the momentum of the evolutionary universe is in full swing, I'm afraid that another star has fallen. Hurry and report this to Supreme Lord Wilbur. Activate all the enchanted barriers. Another world lord of the sacred race urged helplessly. From the very first step the sacred race had taken into the evolutionary universe, they had received much malice, followed by all sorts of natural disasters. But this place was the most important passageway for the sacred race, they had protected it well. Supreme Lord Wilbur, who was guarding this place, was an expert at creating enchanted barriers. If an ordinary star fell on them, it wouldn't do any damage. But it doesn't seem like an ordinary star, the World Lord continued, still staring at the sky. The dark star itself couldn't release any light. No matter how good one's vision was, one couldn't find traces of it in the starry sky with their naked eyes. The star could absorb the surrounding light, concealing itself completely in the dark void. But at the moment, Win controlled the dark star. It fell extremely quickly, forming a circle of dark red flames as it rubbed against space at a high speed. The other martial artists of the sacred race also noticed the strange phenomenon in the sky. Some began reporting to Supreme Lord Wilbur. Soon, a middle-aged man clad in a blue robe flew into the air. He was Supreme Lord Wilbur, the one responsible for protecting this place. When he looked up, his eyes seemed cautious. He noticed that the falling star was no ordinary thing, so he stretched out his hand and a thin, square-shaped plate appeared above his head. The moment the thin plate appeared, it began to spin rapidly. In an instant, enchanted barriers appeared around the Supreme Lord one after another. Supreme Lord Wilbur's enchanted barriers were extremely powerful. The faint curtains of light were enough to resist Supreme Lord's attacks. These enchanted barriers formed quickly, covering everything within 100 miles. Besides the enchanted barriers Supreme Lord Wilbur personally set up, the other warriors of the sacred race also activated all sorts of divine textures, shining with all sorts of colors until there were abundant defensive enchanted barriers around them. The entire process took around 10 seconds. Clearly, the sacred race was well prepared. But how could blocking Wyn's carefully planned attack be so easy? The mass of the Dark Star was already frightening enough. After Wyn activated it, it came crashing down so quickly, its hidden powerful was unimaginably terrifying. Whoosh! When the Dark Star was still several dozen miles from the ground, the pressure it emitted caused a bend in Supreme Lord Wilbur's enchanted barriers. Chapter 1678. Stall for time. Supreme Lord Wilbur had already foreseen the might of the Dark Star ahead of time. The enchanted barriers laid out by him had been broken even before he could have made any reactions. Supreme Lord Wilbur's enchanted barriers were combined with the enchanted barriers that the other sacred world lords had arranged. All of those barriers were obtained after the activation of the divine textures. Even the most powerful Supreme Lord wouldn't be able to break it in such a short time. However, those enchanted barriers were immediately torn apart when the Dark Star descended. The Dark Star's powerful momentum made the sturdy barriers to become suddenly fragile. Supreme Lord Wilbur's eyelids twitched with disbelief. He felt an immense sense of danger and wanted to use the grand teleportation technique to flee. However, the moment he used the grand teleportation technique, he felt that the space around him suddenly froze. No matter how many times he tried to activate the space law, he couldn't tear the space around him apart at all. A Supreme Lord's comprehension of the space law should have already reached an extremely high level. However, the space around Supreme Lord Wilbur was actually locked down by someone. Maha could have used the Grand World technique to change the space law. Aside from him, only a true god would be able to lock down the space around a Supreme Lord. The true god of humankind had made his move. As that miserable thought flashed through Supreme Lord Wilbur's mind, he saw an old man on top of the Dark Star. The old man stood formidably and coldly stared down at Supreme Lord Wilbur, as if Supreme Lord Wilbur was already a dead man. Aside from Supreme Lord Wilbur, who was unable to escape from that place, the other sacred martial artists also had no idea what to do next. They could only helplessly watch as that massive object pressed towards them. However, the Dark Star fell in an instant. It did not take them much time to feel depressed or any pain. They just saw sudden darkness until their bodies were immediately destroyed, and their souls were scattered. Boom! An enormous explosion echoed throughout the place. Afterward, the entire Supreme World shook non-stop. After the Dark Star descended to the ground, a layer of soil was lifted up for tens of thousands of feet. The soil quickly rolled up and was like a tsunami on land. It plowed towards the depths of the Supreme World like a rapid and mobile mountain. Everything in its path was swept away. The Dark Star smashed into the passageway on the sighing wall. The entire star was embedded in the passageway and completely blocked it. A mere Dark Star embedded in the passageway would not be able to obstruct any sacred martial artists. With the grand teleportation technique, they would be able to cross over easily. At that moment, Wyn's eyes flashed with the bright light. He extended his hand and flicked the air. Then his silver hair continuously fluttered with the wind as a dominant and robust aura spread towards the starry sky. Immediately the stars in the sky emitted an intense radiance filled with power. Stars in the sky, listen to my command. Use your powers to seal the worlds forever. Buzz, buzz, buzz. All the stars in the evolutionary universe began to emit a brilliant light. Wyn originally wanted to control the entire universe, but he failed miserably after the attempt. At his current stage, he could only use the star sealing technique of the grand sealing technique to seal the entire space in one go. In this way, the space there would be completely sealed off by Wyn. Additionally, the passageway would also be blocked by him. But he knew he could not just seal everything once and for all. This blockage couldn't last for long. Although the power of the Dark Star was incomparable, the sacred race still had their own ways to repel it. The space sealed by the power of the stars was also incomparably solid, but it was still unable to resist the attack of a true god from the sacred race. A true god would be able to find a way to tear up the seal. If that happened, Win's technique would be dispelled. However, it would still take some time for the true god to destroy the dark star and tear apart the star sealing technique. It would require intense concentration to build enough soul power and destroy the seal. Therefore, Win's true purpose was to stall for time. Since the sacred race first stepped into the evolutionary universe, Win continuously weighed the strength of both sides. Among all the sacred warriors of the first expedition team, only 59 supreme lords of the sacred race and one godly genius, Maha, were sent to the evolutionary universe. Countless other world lords also went there, but they could be ignored as they were not that powerful. But, of these 59 supreme lords, 3 had already been killed by Zen. Additionally, Win had killed one more supreme lord earlier. Thus now, there were only 55 supreme lords left. The forces of the sacred race had continued to decrease. The reason why Win had blocked the passageway at the current stage was that he wanted to buy time. He wanted to ensure that the head of the celestial position race would use the destructive methods to kill 55 supreme lords in the shortest time possible. After Win sealed up the passageway, some of the world lords of the sacred race, who were lucky enough to survive, were covered in dust and grime. They were stunned as they glanced around, ignorant of what had just happened. Their confusion was apparent in their faces. Who is that old man? What is he doing here? A world lord from the sacred race asked with bewildered eyes. His tone was filled with curiosity and confusion. No one could answer his question. The other world lords were also ignorant of the events. The expression on Win's face remained calm. With a light stomp on the dark star, he moved like the wind. After his withered fingers lightly tapped on the air, an invisible force spread out. The world lords from sacred race noticed that the situation was unfavorable. Just as they were about to employ the grand teleportation technique to flee from the scene, they discovered that the entire space had been locked down. There was no way to use the grand teleportation technique in this supreme world. Escape would be tough for their low levels of cultivation. Puff, 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 puff. The invisible force instantly crushed the dozens of world lords of the sacred race present. They didn't even have the time to scream before all of them had perished. Corpses were all that was left after Win's attack. After he murdered the weak world lords, Win didn't linger in the area. He stepped out, instantly left the supreme world, and flew towards the center of the universe. The Sunflower Water World was his planned destination, so he rushed towards there. The rest of the supreme lords of the sacred race were hidden in the Sunflower Water World. At that moment, Win wanted to use the star sealing technique to seal the Sunflower Water World. If he didn't do that, then it would be impossible for Win to kill all of the supreme lords within a short period. After all, it was easy for a supreme lord to cross over several supreme worlds through the grand teleportation technique and escape. When Win sealed the passageway, the sacred race had also begun to take action. After Maha died, a shadow of a massive altar descended into the Sunflower Water World. Boom! The enormous altar, which had initially been just a shadow, had begun to reveal itself. It was suddenly located in the center of the Sunflower Water World. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A circle of fire suddenly burned in the center of the altar. Bright flames immediately lit up the entire altar. At the center of the altar was a wide well. A circle of flames burned furiously around it. At the same time, a strange and eccentric song echoed from the altar. The mysterious sound instantly spread throughout the Sunflower Water World. Zen, who wasn't too far away from the altar, could hear it clearly. That altar is summoning something in the well. Zen's eyes flashed with urgency as he grasped the great weighty sword more tightly. A hint of worry was reflected in his eyes. Even in the eyes of the true gods and holy beings, the sacred race was very mysterious. Their power and abilities were enigmatic. Both Murphy and Bromley, Zen's master, studied the sacred race. That was why the sacred warriors appeared in the test of the true path in the fairy palace. Aru, a monster with the head of a chicken and body of a snake drilled out from deep within the well in the center of the altar. As the monster roared, the space law in the Sunflower Water World seemed to become more chaotic. Zen also became unable to employ the grand teleportation technique. The monster with the chicken's head and snake-like body had such a mysterious ability, which seemed similar to Maha's grand world technique, but they were still essentially different. Maha had directly changed the laws within. However, the monster was unable to change the law power. Instead, it made the laws stay in a chaotic state so that the laws could not be used. The flames on the altar continued to burn as the mysterious song persistently reverberated throughout the land. As the song echoed, monsters were relentlessly summoned in the altar. "Au!" As a fierce roar rang out, the entire altar began to shake. Afterward, a monster rushed out of the altar with great speed. It was a monster with the head of a tiger and the body of a bull. Dark red wings grew from its back while long sharp spikes decorated its body like a hedgehog. Violence and ferocity were apparent from its wild expression. The moment the monster rushed out of the altar, it pounced towards Zen without the slightest hesitation. Savage eyes accompanied the monster's feral appearance. Zen was unable to determine the grade of the monster, but the pressure it gave him was immense. A strong sense of crisis arose in his heart as if this monster was even more formidable than a supreme lord. Its powerful claws showcased its destructive strength. If he were faced with a supreme lord, Zen could just cut off his opponent's heavenly destiny by means of the causality-breaking light. However, Zen was unable to use the causality-breaking light to kill the beasts of remote ages summoned by Supreme Lord Denzel through the altar. Zen had only managed to cultivate the profound cause-eliminating technique at the current stage. His current level would make his attacks ineffective towards the monsters. Those beasts of remote ages were born from a cause, and they were actually regarded as the effect. Zen needed to master the profound effect-eliminating technique first so that he could possess the power to exterminate the monstrous beasts. Just as the monster with the tiger's head and bull's body was about to pounce towards Zen, its attack was stopped. A thin and small figure suddenly appeared in the sky and directly in front of Zen. He quickly stepped on the monster. Within a blink of an eye, the monster was trampled into pieces. So powerful, Zen's heart skipped a beat. When he saw clearly who the figure was, Zen recognized that he was actually the head of the Celestial Position race, who carried an evolution lotus flower. The head of the Celestial Position race, Master Feng, chuckled with arrogant eyes. The monster with a tiger's head and the one with a chicken's head are two of the 4 legendary vicious beasts of the sacred race. However, they are not that powerful at all. Chapter 1679, Trapped. The Supreme Lords were divided into 3 ranks, top rank, mid rank, and low rank. However, the division of ranks was not based on one's cultivation level. Strictly speaking, the cultivation level of Supreme Lords was equal to that of Grand World Lords. After their respective inner worlds had expanded several times, they would gradually come to a standstill. What truly made Supreme Lords surpass the World Lords were their heavenly destinies. Therefore, the difference among the top-rank Supreme Lord, the mid-rank Supreme Lord, and the low-rank Supreme Lord lay in the distinction of the power of their heavenly destinies. Instead of cultivation level, the strength of their heavenly destinies would be the basis of a Supreme Lord's rank. Supreme Lord Denzel's heavenly destiny actually possessed the summoning ability. That sort of heavenly destiny was one of the weaker types. Amongst Supreme Lords, Supreme Lord Denzel was ranked near the bottom. With his ranking in consideration, he wouldn't even be qualified to become a mid-rank Supreme Lord. However, Supreme Lord Denzel was still able to become a top-rank Supreme Lord because of the unique nature of the altar. Its immense power and mysterious ability had guided Supreme Lord Denzel to climb the ranks. The wild beasts of sacred race that were summoned from this altar were all destructively mighty. The strength of every single wild beast was comparable to that of a low-rank Supreme Lord. The special abilities some sacred wild beasts possessed could even be similar to the heavenly destinies of mid-rank Supreme Lords. It only meant that Supreme Lord Denzel had access to such a mighty army of beasts. For example, the beast that was directly trampled into pieces by Master Feng was also a formidable and fierce beast. If Zen fought it one-on-one, he might not necessarily gain the upper hand. The beast was strong enough to survive a fight with Zen. However, at that moment, Master Feng showed up with the evolution lotus flower. Great passion was reflected in his eyes as he strived to save the universe. His power was incomparably strong. Along with his move, he had managed to stomp the beast, which had a tiger's head and bull's body, into smithereens. The sacred race didn't expect the Celestial Position to make a move at that moment. Supreme Lord Denzel also revealed a stunned expression. However, he immediately seemed to have understood something as he cried out with alert eyes, "Dang! Everyone, withdraw quickly." The Supreme Lords of the sacred race still amounted to more than 50. Behind the Supreme Lords was the Murphy universe that supported them. Although they had invaded deep into the evolutionary universe, the True God and the many Supreme Lords in the Murphy universe were still on standby. It wouldn't take too long for the sacred Supreme Lords to arrive there with the grand teleportation. As for the True God, he could even arrive in the blink of an eye. Their mobility was definitely fast. Therefore, the sacred race never thought that the Supreme Lords of the evolutionary universe would make a move at that moment. Master Feng's arrival had surprised them. Because the leader of the celestial position had made his move, all the other Supreme Lords of the evolutionary universe would definitely follow behind him. The forces of the evolutionary universe had started to move. Supreme Lord Denzel didn't know that the passage towards the Sighing Wall had already been sealed by Win. However, he was still able to make his own judgment. Since the leader of the celestial position dared to launch a surprise attack at him, he must have made full preparations. That was the reason why Supreme Lord Denzel ordered everyone to withdraw at the first possible moment. His intelligent analysis and quick judgment were products from his experience. However, before he could finish his sentence, the stars in the sky started to shine with brilliant light. The stars radiated power with their brightness. Stars in the sky, listen to my command. Use your powers to seal the worlds forever. Star sealing technique. With the use of the grand teleportation, a true god could cross a universe and reach another universe. It took Win a few seconds to seal the passage to the Sighing Wall. When he finally reached the Sunflower Water world, Win once again used the star sealing technique to completely seal the entire Supreme World. The preparations were finally complete. It was far too tricky for a Supreme Lord to kill another Supreme Lord. If two Supreme Lords fought and one was about to lose, he could still escape death. The loser could quickly flee to a safe place trillion miles away with the use of the grand teleportation. If the Supreme Lords from the sacred race managed to escape, then the whole thing would become complicated. It would take a long time to hunt for the escaped Supreme Lords of the sacred race and kill them. Once, it had taken 400 years for 3 Supreme Lords of the human race to kill a Supreme Lord from a small race. For example, back then, Supreme Lord Leroy had been chased down by the warriors of the Demon Knight and had escaped right under their noses. Since then, he had hidden deep underground for many years. The grand teleportation had ensured his escape and preserved his life. However, Win was a true god, after all. His power was definitely stronger than the Supreme Lords. After he used the star sealing technique, even a true god would find it difficult to break free from it. It would be even much tough for the Supreme Lords that were present there. With Win's technique, all of them were trapped there. There was no way for them to retreat. Crack! Dozens of sacred Supreme Lords hurriedly activated greater teleportation with great panic. However, before the space channels created by the grand teleportation could take into shape, they were immediately disintegrated under their feet. Oh, no, garbage. Those mongrels. The space around us has been sealed. A Supreme Lord said in a daze. Terror was apparent from his expression. How is this possible? Who has the ability to seal off our space? Another Supreme Lord said in disbelief as his eyes widened. It must be a true god. The Supreme Lords of the sacred race were usually arrogant, haughty, and calm. However, in a life and death moment, a small portion of them revealed their true nature. They were flustered as they didn't know how to deal with their predicament. Of course, most of the sacred Supreme Lords stayed calm and composed. Don't panic, Supreme Lord Denzel calmly said. His tone was gentle yet full of authority. Humph, although I don't know what sort of method they used, it won't be easy to take us down either. Supreme Lord Irvin, who was on the other side, looked sullen. He was one of the most bloodthirsty Supreme Lords of the sacred race, and he was already ready to fight. Murderous aura radiated from him. Supreme Lord Palmier was the calmest of the Supreme Lords. We might not have to fight to death with them. Our Grand Supreme Lord must have known about this. We just need to resist for a while before he comes. Just buy some time until our reinforcements arrive. Amongst all the Supreme Lords, Supreme Lord Palmier's analysis was the most accurate. His tone was calm and tranquil. Win had used the star sealing technique in the Dark Star to completely block the passage to the Sighing Wall. However, it wouldn't last long. The Supreme Lords he trapped only needed to survive for a short time and wait for the sacred race to break through the passage again. The reinforcements of the sacred race would eventually come and rescue them. Supreme Lord Palmier's words received the vast majority of the Supreme Lords' approval. Their panic faded as they had a clear solution to their problem. Let me see if you can survive until then. A mysterious and powerful voice rang out. Then, not too far away from the sacred Supreme Lords, an orderly space law burst out. The space law drew out a blazing white line and 2 vertical lines in the air. Afterward, a square door was formed. The door opened, and an old man suddenly appeared in front of the sacred Supreme Lords. The old man's aura radiated immense strength. When Supreme Lords used the grand teleportation, they needed to tear open space. In this process, the power of the space law would often leak out and formed irregular space windstorms. However, when this old man had used grand teleportation to reach here, the space law hadn't leaked in the slightest, nor had there been any space windstorms. In the Supreme Lord's eyes, that particular skill was so magical that it was almost unbelievable. Disbelief was reflected in their expressions. When Supreme Lord Denzel saw the old man, his eyes widened slightly. "It's the true God of the celestial position." His voice was full of surprise and alertness. Several years ago, Maha had once come to the celestial position. Several Supreme Lords accompanied Maha and had seen Win. Naturally, they were able to recognize Win. Since the evolutionary universe had already launched its general offensive, their true God would naturally take action as well. Powerful warriors would start to move in the war. So what if he's a true God? Such a title means nothing in this war. He will still be torn apart by me. Supreme Lord Irvin coldly snorted as all the bones in his body began to produce explosive sounds. Instantly, his body swelled up to 7 or 8 times. It made him look like a formidable giant. At the same time, an intense murderous intent spread out from his body. Although Supreme Lord Irvin was only a mid-rank Supreme Lord, in terms of carnage, he was even scarier than a top-rank Supreme Lord. His thirst for blood was unparalleled. The heavenly destiny of 7 killings he carried was also a murderous way created by Murphy, which was called the 7 killings way. That particular heavenly destiny was very lethal. The holy beings of the divine land had created several large systems. They had the most thorough insights and the best comprehension into the divine land. Although the 7 killings way was not a godly way, there were still many true gods that cultivated it. Its practical uses in a battle were significantly impressive. Supreme Lord Irvin directly carried the heavenly destiny of 7 killings. That particular heavenly destiny was originally Murphy's own comprehension, so the power that Supreme Lord Irvin displayed was extremely horrendous. The 7 killings were the killings of the unfaithful, the unrighteous, the unfilial, the heartless, the discourteous, the unwise, and the disloyal. That cultivation method was very bloodthirsty and dangerous. However, it was a unique way of its own. At that moment, Supreme Lord Irvin had already turned into a god of death and dashed towards Win. A murderous aura radiated from him. Normal Supreme Lords would feel quite a bit of pressure when they faced a true god. After all, a true god was a whole level higher than a Supreme Lord. The difference in strength was not small. It could not easily be overcome. However, Supreme Lord Irvin had activated the 7 killings way. His entire body had been dominated by slaughter, without the slightest hint of emotion. From this point of view, the 7 killings way was actually very similar to the emotion-closing godly way. The only difference was that the 7 killings way wasn't a godly way. It was not as powerful as the emotion-closing godly way, nor was it viewed as a forbidden way within the divine land. Huff! Supreme Lord Irvin charged at Win with incredible momentum. Rage and ferocity were in his eyes. However, Win's expression remained incomparably calm. At that moment, Win casually waved his hand. Suddenly, a handful of faint starlight appeared in his hand. The dots of starlight were like tiny fireflies that flew towards Supreme Lord Irvin immediately after they appeared. The faint starlight was ignored by Supreme Lord Irvin. Barbarity had clouded his judgment. He didn't even have any intention to dodge it. However, the moment the dots of dim starlight touched Supreme Lord Irvin, they turned into balls of light the size of a fist. Power immediately radiated from each of the dots. The balls of light exploded at the chest of Supreme Lord Irvin with destructive intensity. The moment they exploded, the balls of light had thoroughly destroyed Supreme Lord Irvin's body. When he arrived in front of Win, Supreme Lord Irvin's entire body had been already broken into 2 pieces by the starlight. The cinnabar field in his belly had been utterly obliterated. Chapter 1680. Showing off abilities. Supreme Lord Irvin was able to approach Win because of his previous explosive force. By the time he arrived in front of Win, his burst of power had been consumed completely. Supreme Lord Irvin's fist struck Win's chest without power and fell away limply. And then, the broken half of Supreme Lord Irvin's body fell away and towards the ground. Supreme Lord Irvin was dead. The sacred Supreme Lords were stunned as they saw this. They knew that a true god was strong, but Win's strength had exceeded even their imaginations. It was only a handful of starlight, but it was powerful enough to easily kill Supreme Lord Irvin. So how would they be able to withstand it? I'll fight him to the death. I will freeze the Supreme World with frost. I'll risk my life to kill him. With so many of us attacking together, what a true god can do to us. At Supreme Lord Irvin's miserable death, the Supreme Lords realized just how childish their previous thoughts had been. Only a true god from the sacred race could fight such a powerful true god before them. Merely defending themselves couldn't possibly mean that they were a match for this true god. If they wanted to live, they had to fight by putting their lives on the line. Different heavenly destinies simultaneously released lights of different colors. Over 50 Supreme Lords released the life vitality within their bodies at the same time. They activated their heavenly destinies to launch one of the strongest strikes that was ever to be launched. But just how terrifying was the power that this strike contained? Even a true god wouldn't be able to take it head-on. A faint smile appeared on Wynn's face as he took a step back. He stepped into the door formed by the power of space, and as he did so, the door dissipated. He had left using the grand teleportation. The star sealing technique could target a specific group of people. The only ones that were restrained by space were the sacred Supreme Lords. It wasn't that difficult for Wynn to kill a Supreme Lord. But dozens of Supreme Lords were charging at him. He knew that he couldn't defeat them all. Not to forget the fact that there were some extremely powerful Supreme Lords who were capable of fighting a true god. Moreover, his mission was only to lock these Supreme Lords within the Sunflower Water world. There obviously were others who couldn't wait to kill them and who would display their abilities to finish the sacred Supreme Lords. A massive space windstorm exploded in the skies above the Sunflower Water world. A warship, 100,000 feet high and 1 million feet long, emerged from the space storm. The two sides of the warship were inlaid with densely packed Supreme Life Vitality Jades. These Life Vitality Jades were not used to provide energy to the warship, but to maintain the four massive Divine Texture Arrays. They were the Long Vine Array, Buddha Emperor Array, Giant Sun Array, and the Heavenly Tooth Array. Once the four arrays were activated, the shadows of four huge swords appeared around the warship. Margaret was seated at the side of the ship. She made a mysterious gesture with her hands and then pointed her fingers at the four swords. Setting up the complete God's Killing Sword Array required the Long Vine Sword, Buddha Emperor Sword, Grand Sun Sword, and the Heavenly Tooth Sword. But none of these swords were in the evolutionary universe. Fortunately, there were powerful array experts within the celestial position. They deducted the prototypes of the four swords used by the God's Killing Sword Array Margaret had inherited and used the Divine Texture technique to create four virtual swords. This method would consume a great deal of life vitality jades, but this cost was nothing when compared to how the evolutionary universe would be benefited. As Margaret finished arranging the array according to the technique, the four swords looked like they had been completely integrated into the God's Killing Sword Array. She looked into the distance, pointed her third finger and little finger at the sky, and said, "Go." The four swords penetrated through the vast sea of clouds, shooting towards the Sunflower Water world. The four swords shot out and stirred the clouds above the Sunflower Water world into disorder. At the same time, Supreme Lord of Thunder Punishment appeared on the other side of the Sunflower Water world. Four monks stood behind Supreme Lord of Thunder Punishment. These four monks were the four Supreme Lords of the Hidden Spirit Temple, Shay, Jamal, Jace, and Alex. The Supreme Lords of the Blessed Buddha Land, besides Supreme Lord of Thunder Punishment, were not well known in the evolutionary universe and they rarely wandered around the world. But no one could ignore their strength, especially their technique to set up the Grand Buddha Pagoda. Shay, yes. Jamal, yes. Jace, yes. Alex, yes. With all the Buddhas in mind, all the powers become one. Getting rid of all distracted thoughts and emotions, we'll stop at nothing. Quote. Swoosh. Colorful rays of shining light soared into the sky, illuminating the whole Sunflower Water world and coating it in a layer of golden light. An enormous pagoda suddenly appeared in the Sunflower Water world. To the people, it looked like it had no end to its height. If it was placed horizontally, even the Sunflower Water world would probably not be enough to contain it. No matter where one was in the Sunflower Water world, they could clearly see the pagoda. Grand Buddha Pagoda. Subdue. A maroon light appeared between the brows of Supreme Lord of Thunder Punishment and the other four Supreme Lords. Although the auras around them were mild, they were vigorous and lasting and at the moment, were rushing towards the depths of the Sunflower Water world. And then, illusory stars popped up, one after another. The four leaders of the Thoughtless Minds had also entered the Sunflower Water world. The techniques that Mike had taught his disciples were mostly about the stars. The four great clans of the Thoughtless Minds, the Xuanyuan clan, the G clan where Janet was from, the Lai clan, and the G clan where Lucille was from, all had descendants of Mike's disciples. Even the star-destroying array technique, which the four clans had joined hands to perform, had something to do with stars. A space crack appeared not far away from Zen, from which walked out Supreme Lord Helm. Supreme Lord Helm smiled at Zen with a hint of admiration on his face. Zen had killed 3 Supreme Lords in a row, which had shocked the group of Supreme Lords of the evolutionary universe. Zen was only a world lord, but killing the Supreme Lords had been as easy to him as killing chickens or dogs. Such a terrifying ability could awe anyone, which was why many Supreme Lords were glad that Zen was on the same side as them. But Zen still had a huge weakness at the moment. His grand teleportation was just too slow. The Supreme Lords had the ability to cross several Supreme Worlds in an instant. But Zen often needed more time just to cross one. And although the teleportation token allowed Zen to quickly teleport to any Supreme World, it couldn't accurately send him to his destination. This was why Zen had to constantly travel to reach his destination after he used the teleportation token. "I'll send you there," Supreme Lord Helm said to Zen. With his current strength, Zen was qualified to participate in a battle of this level. Once Win had sealed off the space around the Sacred Supreme Lords, Zen could be of great help by killing the Sacred Supreme Lords. Zen nodded as he held the great weighty sword in his hand before Supreme Lord Helm connected to Zen using the space lock. The space lock could not be used to defend against enemies, but by working with powerful warriors, it could still display some absolutely terrifying effects. Zen felt himself rising into the air the moment he was linked by the space lock. He started to move at an unimaginable speed, flying towards the depths of the Sunflower Water World. In the Murphy universe, above the borders of the Sacred Sea World, close to 100 Sacred Supreme Lords had already gathered. They stood there, gazing at the Supreme World Channel in a daze. Unlike the evolutionary universe that had many different races, there was only the sacred race within the Murphy universe. It was easy to gather all of the Sacred Supreme Lords. Win has probably embedded a dark star in the passageway. It swooped down into the channel and stuck itself forcibly into it. It's impossible to use brute force to break it, a Sacred Supreme Lord reported. The face of the Grand Supreme Lord who was at the helm darkened. Can't we even travel through space? No, we can't. The other side of the Dark Star has been completely sealed off. It's impossible to use the grand teleportation to reach the other side, the Sacred Supreme Lord said, shaking his head again. I'll give it a try. The Grand Supreme Lord was impatient, as if on fire. He realized that he had underestimated the evolutionary universe and that they had been too careless in their actions. They had originally thought that as long as the passage of the Sighing Wall was opened, they would be able to enter the evolutionary universe whenever they wanted. Who would have thought that someone would block the passage at such a critical moment? If they couldn't make a move to reinforce in time, the 50-odd Supreme Lords that had been sent into the evolutionary universe would be doomed. Not long after the Grand Supreme Lord entered the passageway, a gentle aura erupted from inside. When the Supreme Lords outside the passageway felt this aura, they understood that the Grand Supreme Lord had used the heavens suppressing object. He wanted to take advantage of the Murphy universe's momentum to open up the passage. It was not long before the Grand Supreme Lord emerged from the passageway, looking dejected. It was pretty obvious that he had failed. We can only ask Pranav for help. Pranav was the true god of the Murphy universe, who was also Murphy's disciple. Holy beings only allowed their most trusted people to enter the universes they had built on their own.